Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share the content on social media. Just so everybody knows that after question period, Kristian Firth is supposed to appear before the bar of the House. Should be a very interesting question period today. Typically Wednesdays are Ask the Prime Minister question days, so typically the Prime Minister is in the House of Commons and Pierre should be there to question them. But who knows with Trudeau, sometimes he doesn't show up. just letting everyone know, I gotta mute the O Canada because I do get hit with a copyright every single time, and will hold my video up for at least a month. So I will mute it and then unmute it in a moment.
Épopée des plus brillants exploits. We stand on guard for thee, O Canada, we stand for thee.
Let the doors be open, que l'on ouvre les portes. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. L'honorable député, the honourable member from Guelph.
Mr. Speaker, the month of April is dedicated to bringing awareness to Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's is a lifelong, incurable brain disease, and no two journeys are the same. Every day in Canada, 30 individuals are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and more than 100,000 people in Canada are living with Parkinson's, including my wife Barbara and now my sister Paula. The reality for people who face a Parkinson's diagnosis is that many aspects of their lives will be disrupted. However, people living with Parkinson's can find new ambitions and joys even after many years after a diagnosis. I'm proud to support organizations like Parkinson Canada who are ensuring a better quality of life for those living with Parkinson's. This April, as we mark Parkinson's Awareness Month, I commit to advocating for more research, improved treatments, and access to medicines and equitable care for people living with Parkinson's disease. Together we can ensure that a full and vibrant life with Parkinson's is still possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Prince Albert.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak on a respected example of Indigenous reconciliation in the town of Weldon, Saskatchewan. On Saturday, residents came together to participate in a pancake breakfast to raise money for a playground to commemorate the life of Wes Peterson. Wes was a former resident and victim of the mass stabbing on and around James Smith Cree Nation in September of 2022. The Weldon Playground project was created in February to raise $150,000 for a new playground in Wes's memory. On Saturday, James Smith Cree Nation Chief Kirby Constant, Chief Calvin Sanderson, and Councillor Adam Whitehead presented the fundraising committee with a check for $116,000 to help build this playground. During the breakfast, the James Smith Cree Nation also gifted a town painting by local Indigenous artists. I must say, the room was filled with tears of joy. May Wes's memory live on through the community playground built for the residents of Weldon and the surrounding area and their families. And to the James Smith Cree Nation, thank you for your contribution and generosity to this project.
The honourable member for Notre-Dame-de-Grâce Westmount.
Today I rise in the House to recognize a wonderful community leader and local hero, Eddie Nolan, who passed away on April 12th. Eddie spread joy and inspired so many of us. His commitment to the Terry Fox Foundation annual run was contagious. Eddie ran his first marathon after watching Terry Fox cross Montreal's Jacques Cartier Bridge in 1980. He ran dozens more over the years, raising more than $1 million for cancer research. Many students at Roslyn Elementary, where Eddie worked, knew him as a supportive and inspiring figure. He helped them to learn how to talk about cancer. Merci, Eddie, pour tes énormes...
Thank you, Eddie, for your huge contribution. We will miss you.
L'honorable député de Mirabel.
The honourable member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, you know I've often said in this House that our business community has all kinds of talented people. You know about our maple syrup. I've been talking about that for a long time. But now I'd like to transport you to the universe of pastry. More particularly, I'd like to talk to you about a thriving business, Farine et Chocolat. It was founded in 2025 and excels in the preparation of artisanal pastry. a winning strategy and a delicious one. And now, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to transport you again to Miami because in April there will be the American Cake Awards, which honors the best bakers in North America. And can you guess? Farine Chocolat is a finalist in the Rising Star category. We are so proud. On behalf of this House, I'd like to wish the whole Farine Chocolat team good luck, and we wish you the greatest success. The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had very good news yesterday in our 2024 budget, and we know just how important it is to get young people to be able to reach their potential and contribute to their community, especially in agriculture. This is why I'd like to talk about how effective the Youth Employment Skills Program is. It is helping get these young people jobs in the agricultural sector in Châteauguay-Lacolle and soon in Jardin de Napierville. This program is highly appreciated by producers. I'm thinking of businesses like Deferred, Les Jardins Guérin, or Ferme Unami, among others, who, because of this program, will be able to inspire the next generation of agricultural producers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Edmonton, Wetaskiwin.
Mr. Speaker, April is World Autism Month, and now 26 years since my son Jaden was diagnosed. Since then, I've embarked on an unanticipated lifetime of learning experiences. For example, I've learned at home to always check for finger lines in the butter dish, or cupcakes, or just food generally. I've learned that an urgent ba 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 in the car often means an iPhone left behind, or a missed Google Maps turn. More importantly, I've learned that we tend to wrongly divide the world into people who give help and people who need help. In reality, as human beings, we are at various times helpers or helped, sometimes both at once. Deciphering what Jaden needs or wants is often incredibly hard. But what I learn in the process, waiting on him, paying attention to his nonverbal communication, and assuming he has something to say, these lessons help me in every human interaction I have. And right now, finding ways to better understand one another is something our world needs more than anything else.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver-Granville.
Mr. Speaker, my riding of Vancouver-Granville is a microcosm of Canada. We're diverse in faith and background, and we are united together as Canadians. Recently, I attended an interfaith dinner hosted by a Foundation for a Path Forward and the South Vancouver Neighbourhood House, which left me with a full heart and full of hope for what we can do together. With the theme of breaking bread and building bonds, Vancouver's faith leaders, politicians, and community leaders sat together. They broke bread together. They found common cause together. Their example is an example to all of us that despite the challenges we see in our world every day, war, uncertainty, hate, we must never waver in our commitment to foster pluralism, understanding, and empathy across our differences. It's incumbent upon all of us, Mr. Speaker, to heed the lessons of that evening and to redouble our efforts to build bridges of cooperation and mutual respect, to draw inspiration from and to reaffirm our shared values of courage, strength, and compassion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with you the inspiring program of Lucy and Lee's health and painting class in Humber River, Black Creek. Started by Lucy Catania and the late Lee Jackson, is a program for seniors by seniors where they can come together for a range of activities at the Carmen Di Stefano Community Center. One of their main activities is painting beautiful pieces of artwork. Their program isn't just about art, though. It's about social inclusion and mental well-being. Programs like these are vital for our seniors, offering them more than just paint and canvas, but a true sense of belonging. Co-founder Lee Jackson passed away last year, but her legacy continues to inspire the seniors through a beautiful mural displayed in her memory. Let us continue supporting initiatives and programs that promote the mental well-being being of our seniors. Thank you to community leaders like Lucy and Lee. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, it has been confirmed that this government broke the rules by giving preferential treatment to their Liberal friends at McKinsey and Company. The procurement ombudsman has found that the government did in fact favour McKinsey, a firm that has received over $100 million of government contracts, even changing the eligibility requirements to make sure that McKinsey was selected. It was this Prime Minister's friend, Dominic Barton, then CEO of McKinsey, that recommended the creation of this $35 billion Canada Infrastructure Bank, which then awarded $1.5 million in contract to McKinsey. While this Prime Minister rewards his Liberal friends with cushy consulting jobs, Canadians are faced with out-of-control rent and mortgages and are choosing between eating and heating their homes. This Liberal government is not worth the cost and not worth the corruption. Conservatives will end the corruption and fire high-priced Liberal consultants.
The honourable member from Whitby.
Mr. Speaker, it was deeply disheartening earlier this month to witness the Premier of Ontario resorting to personal attacks instead of addressing the pressing need for a Whitby hospital. My constituents have shared distressing tales of loved ones enduring agonizing waits for essential care. These stories paint a dark picture of the dire state of our healthcare system in Durham Region, and the promise of funding a Whitby hospital was made, and we've been waiting well over 2 years for a planning grant to move forward. The failure of the province to allocate necessary resources for this vital healthcare project comes on the heels of our government investing over $80 billion in Ontario's healthcare system. The need for a fully equipped hospital in Whitby is not going away. In fact, it's getting more pressing and urgent every day. I will always advocate for families in my riding so our loved ones can get the health care that they deserve.
The honourable member from Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal government simply isn't worth the cost. On April 1st, they raised the carbon tax by 23%. This hits our farmers and our food industry particularly hard. Canadians understand that when farmers, truckers, and processors pay thousands of dollars in carbon tax, this makes the food we buy more expensive. Canadians are paying way too much at the grocery store for their food. Another 2 million Canadians are visiting food banks each month just to feed their families because they can no longer afford groceries. Conservatives are fighting against the NDP Liberal government every day to lower the price of groceries and bring tax relief for Canadians. That's why Conservatives brought in Bill C-234 to remove the carbon tax on Canadian farmers. However, the Prime Minister's hand-picked senators have gutted this bill, and NDP and Liberal MPs have worked very hard to keep the carbon tax on food. It's time to axe the tax on farmers and food by immediately passing Bill C-234 in its original form. Let's axe the tax and bring it home.
The honourable member from Yorkton Melville.
Yesterday's budget just offered more of the same after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. It was the worst news possible for Canadians struggling to buy food, heat their homes, and save for a down payment. This Prime Minister just won't listen to Canadians. He won't stop adding to his inflationary deficits that balloon interest rates. He won't stop putting social programs and jobs at risk. The $54 billion to be spent on debt interest surpasses federal health care spending. And he won't axe the carbon tax on farmers and food. This budget is about to make life a whole lot worse for Canadians, and their message to this Prime Minister is clear. Just stop. Stop the out-of-control spending, deficits, inflation, and tax hikes that are forcing struggling people over the edge. This budget, this government, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost to any generation. It's time for common sense Conservatives to clean up the mess and govern with common sense for Canadians.
The honourable member from Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, as international demand for Indigenous tourism accelerates, our government's working with Indigenous tourism operators to maximize the sector's potential. Investing $20 million in the Indigenous Tourism Fund, we're not just supporting an industry, we're fostering reconciliation, empowerment, and prosperity for Indigenous communities. The province of New Brunswick sits on the unceded territories of 15 First Nations communities, and our Indigenous tourism sector is growing rapidly. The wide network of operators offers rich and diverse experiences, ranging from art galleries to delicious traditional cuisine, from craft workshops to night kayaking. A few weeks ago, when the Honourable Minister of Tourism visited our riding, she and I had the opportunity to participate in a tree spirit tour led by Westaquay Elder Cecilia Brooks. This adventure is aimed at creating a more harmonious world by interacting with the land and sharing a cultural experience together. Experiences like this are invaluable, not only for the regional economy, but also for fostering shared understanding on our path towards meaningful reconciliation. I invite all members to celebrate Indigenous tourism, and better yet, come to Fredericton to see the best of Indigenous tourism.
The Honourable Member from London Fanshawe.
After years of Doug Ford gutting and privatizing our healthcare system, it is harder than ever to get support for young families, patients with complex needs, and new Canadians. But a London family healthcare clinic has stepped up. Dr. Brenda Kasher is the founder and a director of GROW, Grounded Roots, Open Wings, a not-for-profit organization whose mission it is to prevent and treat adverse childhood experiences and prevent the intergenerational transmission of trauma. Dr. Kasher and her team strongly believe that the focus of our healthcare team, our system, should be to foster wellness rather than treat disease, and they have supported more than 4,000 families and 1,800 kids in London. Most of their patients are low-income families and newcomers that don't have access to a family doctor and cannot access services like breastfeeding support, postpartum counseling, systems navigation, and so much more. Dr. Kasher and her incredible team are the healthcare heroes fighting for patients, unlike our current Conservative provincial government. And we need to do more to deliver healthcare in a holistic way that puts people before profits.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to pay tribute to Mr. Côté and Mr. Paul Brisson, who died recently. From Bergeron, this gentleman spent most of his life in Bécomo, where he left a mark. He leaves a considerable legacy in the North Shore. He was one of the founders of the Bécomo newspaper. He founded or co-founded all kinds of monthly publications. He was recognized in 2010 when he received the Order of Monthly Publications of Quebec. He worked his entire life for press freedom and to increase the press's presence in our region. To his loved ones and to his family of those in the publishing industry, I'd like to recognize him. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Calgary, Forrest Lawn.
After saying budgets balance themselves, this incompetent Liberal NDP Prime Minister delivered his 8th inflationary budget that raised taxes and deficits. He poured $40 billion of new inflationary fuel on the fire he started. Canadians are on the hook to pay more for this Prime Minister's debt in interest charges than what goes to health care or national defence. This photo op budget gave no hope to the moms putting food back on grocery shelves or those renewing their mortgages at double or triple the rate. He doubled mortgages, rents, and needed down payments on a house. He hiked the carbon tax, Sam, 23% after Canadians told him to spike the hike. He's not worth the cost. It's time for a carbon tax election. The NDP need to stop protecting their leader's pension and propping up this corrupt Prime Minister. Let Canadians decide whether they want more Liberal NDP corruption and more of the same, or a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Let's bring it home.
The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, in Creole, La Nous means our home. It's a TV series, most of whose stars are of African descent. It is the first time that a TV series about the Haitian community is being shown on Radio-Canada. I'm proud to welcome the main actors of this series to Parliament Hill. They are Frédéric Pierre, Catherine Souffron, Fayol Jean, Mireille Métellus, and the co-writer Angelo Cadet. It's important to recognize the impact of the series because of its representation of ethno-cultural groups on television. I salute Radio-Canada for producing this series, and I can congratulate all those who contributed to the production of the series. I wish them every success for the future. Thank you.
questions. Questions orales. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Qui va?
Who will pay? Who will pay for this $50 billion orgy in new inflationary spending? It's not going to be those who are able to hide their wealth, nor the billionaires who invite the Prime Minister to private islands. They'll hide their money. Who will pay? The same person as always. You will pay. You who are losing your homes because of the rising interest rates. You, the ones who are paying too much taxes, who can't feed your kids. Why pay for him? I would just like to remind all members to direct their comments to the chair. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian economy cannot succeed if young Canadians cannot succeed. We have an economy that needs to do more to ensure that young people can have a strong future, a house, and it's the dreams of the middle class that the previous generations had. That's why we put together a budget that offers a fair chance to all the generations to succeed. And yes, we're asking the wealthiest to contribute a bit more, while the Leader of the Opposition is preaching austerity. He's defending the wealthiest, and we will be there for the middle class. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, it's the 9th deficit, 9 years of this Prime Minister. He is not worth the cost, as always. Canada is not a fair country for young generations after 9 years of his government, which doubled the cost of housing, doubled rents, doubled the national debt. Why wait for a different result with the same old approach? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, instead of picking austerity like the former Conservative government did and like the Conservative Party currently is preaching, we chose to invest, and we're continuing to choose to invest in young families to be able to buy a home, in seniors, in young people, students. So we're investing in the jobs of the future. We're investing in new technologies. This is a choice that we're making to invest in Canadians, because that's how you build a stronger economy. The Conservatives can continue to encourage cuts and austerity. We will continue to invest for the betterment of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Who pays? Who pays for this latest $50 billion orgy of spending by this costly Prime Minister? We know who won't pay. It won't be those with trust funds that protect their millions of inheritance like the Prime Minister, nor the billionaires that invite him to their private Caribbean islands. They'll hide their money. You know who will pay? You will pay. You, the welder or waitress who can't pay your mortgage because he's inflated the mortgage rates. You will pay because he carbon taxed your food and now you can't feed your kids. Why should you pay for him?
My comment still applies. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to see the lengths to which the Leader of the Opposition will go to avoid saying that he is choosing to stand with the ultra-wealthy, against the middle class, against young Canadians. When we first got elected and raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% to lower them for the middle class, the Conservative Party and that leader voted against it. We are asking for the wealthiest in this country, the wealthiest 0.1%, to pay more in taxes so we can support the middle class, so we can restore the dream, particularly for young people, of home ownership, of a brighter future that the world is taking away from people all over the world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister likes to blame the world for the problems that he caused. He doubled the debt, doubled the rent, doubled mortgage payments, doubled the needed down payment, and now he's doubling down on the same costly mistakes that have made life unaffordable for Canadians. When will this Prime Minister realize that he's not worth the cost and that repeating the same thing 9 times and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity?
The right honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, what the Leader of the Opposition is saying is that he stands with the ultra-wealthy 0.1% in this country, and everyone else is on their own, because that's what he would do as he slashes programs, as he slashes investments, as he doesn't build the homes necessary, as he doesn't have a plan to fight climate change and create good jobs, as he has stood against affordability measures, as he stands against seniors getting dental care, Mr. Speaker. He is choosing to stand with the ultra-wealthy while we are investing in Canadians and building a stronger future that is fair for everyone.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he is the ultra-wealthy. He hid his family fortune in a tax-sheltered trust fund so he wouldn't have to pay the same tax as everyone else. He vacations with the ultra-wealthy on their private islands in tax-preferred locations where they can hide their money and avoid paying their fair share here in Canada. And now he's paying off the ultra-wealthy by spending $54 billion on debt interest, more than on health care. Why give more money to the ultra-wealthy bankers and bondholders instead of the nurses and doctors?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, this is a budget that invests in fairness for every generation by asking the ultra-wealthy to pay a little more. And, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party is choosing to stand with the status quo, stand with the ultra-wealthy, instead of saying, yes, we need to invest in young people. We need to build more houses. We need to support seniors with dental care. We need to create more spaces in childcare. We need to deliver hundreds of dollars a month tax-free in a disability benefit. These are the things we will be doing. Those are the things that they stand against.
The Honourable Member for Beloit-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, childcare is Quebec's and provincial jurisdiction. Dental insurance is Quebec's and the province's. Medicare, pharmacare is the same. Infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, it's the same. The Prime Minister has a fascination for Quebec's and provincial jurisdiction. I want to ask the Prime Minister this. Has he already considered to really going into what interests him to run in his preferred province, which is Ontario? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind my friend from the bloc that I'm a proud Quebecer and I will always be so. And I am not going to have this proud identity taken away from me. Yes, I am concerned about the fate of Quebecers and that of all Canadians, and that is why we are working with the provinces like Quebec to invest in more childcare spaces. We invest $600 million by investing in childcare to help Quebec to deliver on these childcare spaces. This was a promise we made with Premier Legault. We'll continue to be there to be. The Honourable Member for Beloit-Chambly. I'm not convinced that the Quebec government is saying the same thing as the Prime Minister of Canada is. And I'm still proud to be a Quebecer, but in my case, I'm so proud that I have confidence in Quebec, and I think that this should be a country. And I'm not sure that he has the same amount of confidence. Can the Prime Minister recognize that all these interferences in Quebec and provincial areas of jurisdiction are funded exclusively by the everlasting fiscal imbalance? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am so proud to be a Quebecer that I find my place in Canada like all Quebecers do. We are proud to be Canadians and to be Quebecers, and for most of us, there is no choice to be made between the two. We can be proud of being Quebecer and a Canadian at the same time. We will continue to be there to invest hand in hand along with the province of Quebec to deliver for Quebec, as we do with our partners across the country. But in fact, Quebec is often ahead when it comes to social issues and social programs and investing. And that's why we model much of what we do on what is being done in Quebec.
The honourable member from Burnaby South.
Young people see right through this Prime Minister. They know they're getting ripped off, and they know the reason for it. Today, rent is doubled, grocery prices are sky high, and we're paying some of the highest cell phone bills in the world. The reason is because of corporate greed. This Prime Minister refuses to take it on, and the Conservatives, they're afraid anytime we mention corporate greed because they want to defend those corporations. So when will the Liberals finally take on...
There are some members in this place who, like the Speaker, had difficulty hearing the member from Burnaby South finish or ask his question. So I'm going to ask the honourable member from Burnaby South to start again his question, but I'm going to ask all members on all sides of the House to please hold yourselves until you have the opportunity to be recognized by the Speaker to ask your question or to answer the question. The honourable member from Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know what happens. Anytime I take on corporate greed, the Conservatives get really upset because we're taking on their masters, so they get upset about it. But I'll be careful not to say too much because I know the Conservatives get so angry when we mention corporate greed. But what happens is young people are seeing they're getting ripped off with rent, they're getting ripped off with groceries, getting ripped off with the high cost of cell phone fees, and they know it's because of corporate greed. The Conservatives don't want me to talk about this, but will the Liberals take on corporate greed, which is driving up the cost of living?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize with this budget that Canada cannot be successful unless young people are successful, unless every generation sees a real and fair chance to succeed. That's why we're stepping up to invest in new homes that young people are going to be able to afford, in making sure that their rent payments count towards a credit score to get them a mortgage eventually. We're investing in more support for Canadians living with disabilities. We're investing in supports for seniors. We're investing in entrepreneurship for young people. We're making the kinds of investments that are going to grow the economy, support young people, and restore the dream of a stronger Canada for everyone.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Mention corporate greed, which is driving up the cost of living. Les jeunes se font...
Young people are getting ripped off at the grocery store. They know it. They go to Loblaws and they're seeing record profits being taken in. And yesterday's Liberal budget does nothing to resolve this. They're continuing, that is, Loblaws and Metro, are continuing to get rich with billions from the government. Why will the Prime Minister not call them to order instead of making young people pay? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, this budget does recognize that the success of our country depends on the success of young people. That's why we are asking the wealthiest to pay a bit more in taxes, income taxes, in order to be able to share more benefits with young people, to be able to ensure that young families can pay their rents and buy a home so that young families can have a better access to the services and care they need, particularly when it comes to childcare. We will continue to be here to support families in need and asking the wealthiest to do more. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
You to know that the status quo is unacceptable, that Canada has become an unfair country where young people, an entire generation, cannot afford a home and families cannot afford food. And if he finds out who's been running this place for the last 9 years, there will be hell to pay. Will the Prime Minister complete his investigation and tell us who's been in charge for the last decade?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
When we first got elected, we raised taxes on the wealthy.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we got elected, first thing we did was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them for the middle class, a measure that the Conservative Party voted against. We've continued to invest in young people, invest in standing up a national housing strategy after the previous government had completely ignored housing, and the former housing minister, who is now leader of the opposition, was responsible for creating exactly 6 affordable homes in his time as minister. We've continued to invest, and we're going to continue to make sure that the economy is fair for every generation, and that means asking the wealthiest to pay a little more so we can put more money in the pockets of the middle class.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has got to stop getting his facts from his incompetent housing minister's Twitter account. Yes. This is the same guy who, as immigration minister, lost track of 1 million people. When I was housing minister, we built 92,782 new apartment units with an average rent of $973. How many apartments will the Prime Minister build at the price of $972 a month this year?
Here. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our housing plan is the most ambitious and comprehensive in Canada's history, and will unlock close to 4 million homes by 2031. This happens because we're working with municipalities, we're working with provinces to increase the levels of ambition. We've put out the most comprehensive and ambitious housing plan this country has ever seen, because we know that making sure that young people can afford a home, making sure we change the way homes are built in this country, is about building a stronger future for everyone in this country. That's what fairness for every generation looks like. That's what this government is focused on, while they're focused on cuts.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, we will cut the rent. When I was Minister of Housing, we paid half as much for rent in Canada that we pay today. And on that question of his ambitious housing plan, I decided to read all about it in their 2015 platform. They said, "We will make it easier for Canadians to find an affordable place to call home." That was 9 years ago. Wow. They doubled the cost since that promise was made, and then they repeated the promise yesterday. Why do we expect the same promise with the same programs and the same Prime Minister to be kept this time?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I was in Vancouver a few weeks ago to speak with young people about the fact that we're supporting renters with greater protections and making sure that the money they spend every month on rent actually gets counted in their credit score so they can help get a mortgage on into the future. Our housing plan will unlock 3.87 million new homes by cutting red tape, by reforming zoning, by lowering costs of home building, by using public lands and vacant government offices for housing. We're making it easier to save up for a tax-free for a down payment. We're helping end chronic homelessness and make homes more affordable. We're going to continue doing it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Oh, he's going to turn public buildings and land into housing. Wonder where we got that idea. Well, actually, it was, let me quote, "We will conduct an inventory of all federal lands and buildings that could be repurposed and make some of these lands available at low cost for affordable housing." That is from his 2015 budget. Oh. And now, 9 years later, he can only point to 13 homes on those public lands. And yesterday, he promised a rapid review of all the federal land portfolios. Rapid review. How rapid? Another 9 years?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we made a choice. We made a choice to invest in Canadians, and that started when we took office because the previous government had not invested in Canadians, continued to choose cuts to services, continued to choose austerity over the kinds of investments that a confident country should be making in its citizens. And that's where we have stepped up, and that's where we are stepping up right now to make sure that young people have the opportunities to build a strong future themselves by asking the wealthiest 0.1% to pay more in taxes. Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition continues to stand with the ultra-wealthy while we stand with...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Named immigration for housing costs and the immigration minister who caused it all. Then he made that minister responsible for housing. Since that time, that minister has a $4 billion housing accelerator that he admits will not build any homes, no specific homes. And in fact, since it began, housing starts have gone down this year, and his housing agency says they'll go down next year and the year after that. How is it the Prime Minister can spend $4 billion on a housing accelerator that decelerates home building?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I'm happy to talk about the housing accelerator because it stands in direct contrast with any plan that the Leader of the Opposition has put forward to pick fights with municipalities and provinces on housing. We're actually stepping up with investments that are allowing for more densification, for 4 units as of right, to make sure there's better use of public lands, including by municipalities and provinces, by making sure we're changing the math around building affordable homes to unlock millions of homes over the coming years. This is the work that we're doing right across the country with people who are ambitious about solving the housing crisis. If the Leader of the Opposition doesn't want to help solve it, he needs to keep getting out of the way.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, it was solved when rent was $973 a month, Mr. Speaker, until he came along. But more proof that he is not worth the cost after 9 years. He's blaming the whole world. If the world is to blame for the housing problems in Canada, then why is it that housing here is 50 to 75% more expensive than in the United States? Why is it that housing costs have risen faster than in any other G7 country relative to incomes? Why is it that we have the fewest homes per capita despite having the most land and the most lumber? Why? Is it him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite well knows that Canada's population is growing faster than our fellow countries around the world, and that is a good thing. It is a good thing that we continue to draw in people to be successful in this country. It is also extremely important that we recognize that even as the world is faced with challenges around inflation, disrupted supply chains, getting over the pandemic, conflicts and shifting geopolitics, Canada is actually on solider footing fiscally than any of our other G7 partners, with a lower debt to GDP ratio, a lower deficit, and a continued focus on creating the jobs and the future that Canadians need.
The Honourable Member for Belleau-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in the budget, the Prime Minister has to recognize that really important subjects to people are under Quebec and provincial jurisdiction. He is therefore using the fiscal imbalance where there's much more money than he should get, and Quebec and the provinces have less. Does he recognize that in order to complete his exercise on the backs of the Quebec and the provinces, he is using the federal spending power put in place by former Prime Minister Trudeau? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, while the Bloc Québécois continues to meddle and squabble, we're working hand in hand with the Quebec government with our Housing Accelerator Fund in which we have invested across the country with Quebec because Quebec was prepared to work ambitiously with us. We were able to invest $900 million, and which Quebec doubled in order to be able to invest in housing. That's the kind of partnership that will deliver for Quebecers. It's a model for the other provinces as well, because we will be there to deliver for housing and other units across the country. The Honourable Member for Belleau-Chambly. He is so hand in hand with the government of Quebec that it's the Conservatives that are recruiting for the CAQ. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister admit that he is responsible by not respecting his obligations of $6 billion in deficit in Quebec, and that he is responsible in his $40 billion of $8 billion on the backs of Quebecers, and that he has put Quebecers in debt by $14 billion due to a deficit, and that's his responsibility? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, The Bloc is only trying to squabble with Ottawa, and we are here to work in partnership with the government of Quebec. And in fact, we're not always going to agree on everything. That would be a little too boring. We need to have some kind of creative tension. But that's exactly what has happened with regard to the housing investments in the future, the manufacturing future of Quebec, in investments that are creating solutions with long-term jobs for Quebecers. We're here to work in partnership, and we will continue to do so. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, without his centralizing ideology, the Prime Minister would admit that housing is a federal jurisdiction. So the results are in his hands. Montreal has seen an increase of 200% in rent in the past 9 years under this Prime Minister, who is not worth the cost after all his interference in Quebec's area and provincial jurisdiction. He has managed to increase the cost. Will he take this responsibility and the blame personally for having increased the cost of housing? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we see quite clearly the Conservative leader's philosophy. It's that to stand with the wealthiest and to tell everyone else, well, you're alone. We're not going to be there to support you. That is what he says when he pushes austerity and cuts. We have chosen to work in partnership with the Mayor of Montreal, with the Premier of Quebec, with the premiers across the country in order to work together to build housing, to respond to the pressures that we're experiencing in Canada as elsewhere in the world. We are here to create a stronger and more fair future for the next generations. That's what this budget is doing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Says that this is all about fairness. Well, we'll take him at his word and read the story of Emily, who told the Toronto Star that she could afford a home in 2015 with a mortgage $2,000. But after this Prime Minister's inflationary deficits ballooned mortgage rates, she lost her home, and now she rents a small apartment for $4,000 a month. So small, she says she can smell her own neighbors. Has the Prime Minister been fair to Emily?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our economy can't succeed unless young people are successful, and that's why the focus in this budget is on fairness for every generation, which is why we are asking the wealthiest 0.1% to pay more in taxes to be able to support families like Emily's and others across the country that have lost the dream of home ownership because of the way the global economy is going, because of pressures that they're living. This is why we're continuing to step up, but what we don't see is why the Conservative leader continues to stand with the ultra-wealthy, continues to block attempts to invest in dental care for low-income people.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that was exactly the promise he made 9 years ago. He said that Emily wouldn't have to pay any more, that some rich guy would pay. But since then, his trust fund hasn't paid any more taxes. The billionaires that host him on private islands, they don't pay any more taxes. They hide their money abroad. But Emily is paying. She's paying $4,000 a month for an apartment that is so small, she says she smells her neighbors. Is the Prime Minister treating Emily fairly?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative solution for Emily is for governments to do less to support her, to do less to invest in childcare that she may or may not need for her kids, the support for her parents or grandparents who can go to the dentist now because of a Canada Dental program that the Conservatives have blocked, the investments that are going to actually support building more infrastructure in her community, whether it's public transit and, quite frankly, the investments that are going to ensure more apartment buildings, more affordable rentals, more affordable homes are being built. He wants to do less for Emily. We're doing more.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in 2015, Emily had a home with a mortgage payment of $2,000. Now, she has an apartment with a rental payment of $4,000. How can he possibly suggest that she's better off paying twice as much to rent a place than she was under Conservatives owning one?
Here, here, here. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, how can the leader of the Conservative Party actually believe that doing less to invest in Emily's future is of help to her? He is standing here continuing to push for austerity and cuts to programs and cuts to the kinds of supports that, yes, Canadians need more than ever before, because the world is a much more challenging place. That is why we're continuing to step up. That's why we're asking the wealthiest 0.1% to pay a little more, something that he is standing against, that he will be voting against, because he's still in the pockets of the ultra-wealthy instead of focusing on Canadians who need it.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
Young Canadians have heard the Prime Minister's broken promises for years. 7 years ago, he promised to fix the housing crisis. But what did he do? He built luxury apartments that no one can afford. He let speculators drive up the cost of homes. We know that he's never had to worry about making the rent. So my question for the Prime Minister is this: does he regret the bad decisions he's made that's got us into this mess?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in 2017, we created the National Housing Strategy, which put millions of families into homes across the country. We've continued to step up with investments, including last year with the Housing Accelerator that has delivered increased densification and going to be building thousands upon thousands of homes over the coming years. And we're continuing to step up in this budget, which is focused on fairness for every generation, to make sure that young people can again see a pathway to home ownership, can be able to afford rents in the cities in which they work. These are things that we're continuing to do because Canadians need it.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
There is something very wrong when a Prime Minister doesn't have a problem keeping the Conservatives' $60 billion corporate handout, but denies Indigenous children the dignity of safe housing and decent schools, and the communities the same access to good roads and clean water. How can the Prime Minister look Indigenous people in the eyes after putting the greed of CEOs in front of the need of Indigenous families?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've continued to step up over the past years for reconciliation and investing in Indigenous communities. This budget has put aside $1 billion more on top of all the investments we've made for Indigenous housing. That's part of the $9 billion investments we're talking about for Indigenous communities over the coming years. We know there's always more to do, but we will be there hand in hand with Indigenous communities and leadership to make sure we're closing the gaps and building the strong future that is part of the journey of reconciliation.
The Honourable Member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, too many children are going to school on empty stomachs, and that is not fair. It was our Liberal government who enhanced the Canada Child Benefit, brought forward $10 day childcare, and many other sports Canadian families rely on. Can the Prime Minister inform this House of the next steps of our plan to support middle-class families getting ahead?
Great question.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Brampton South for her question and for her hard work. While the opposition leader is taking cues from his lobbyist entourage on how to make the rich richer, we're investing in programs to help middle-class Canadians. Yesterday's budget includes a national school food program. It's expected to provide meals for more than 400,000 kids a year and save the average family as much as $800 per year in grocery costs. This is what the Conservative leader has already announced he'll be voting against.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And after 9 years and much spent, not a single meal served. What he has served up is a tax on the food of the very children he claims to want to help. A tax that will cost every single middle-class family more than they get back in rebates, according to a scientific study by the Parliamentary Budget officer, a tax he increased by 23%. If he really wants to stop the hunger for 1 in 4 kids in schools today, will he axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just this past Monday, millions of Canadians received the Canada Carbon Rebate in their bank accounts. That puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families across the jurisdictions in which it applies, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. 8 out of 10 families, which is middle class and lower income families. But the Leader of the Opposition chooses to stand once again with the wealthiest families, the ones with big indoor swimming pools and 9 big cars. Those are the things they're choosing to stand with because we're putting more money back in the pockets of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister thinks anyone who puts gas in their car is rich and needs to be made poor. He thinks any single mother who's not already pouring water in her children's milk is too rich, and he wants to make her poorer. He thinks that families that are heating their homes in big, cold Canada are too rich, and he wants to make them poor. A little bit rich, coming from the guy who stuffed his family fortune in a tax-sheltered trust fund and helps his billionaire island friends avoid paying their bills. So why doesn't he stop taking from the have-nots to give to the have-yachts?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in this budget, we're proposing to ask the ultra-wealthy to pay more in taxes to support lower-income Canadians and middle-class Canadians, something that the Conservatives are standing against, Mr. Speaker. They choose to stand with the ultra-wealthy while we continue to invest in supports for families. We've cut the child poverty rate in half since 2016. We've continued to move forward on investing in supports for families right across the country. And with this budget focused on fairness for every generation, we're continuing to do exactly that despite the opposition of the Conservatives.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's not the opposition of the Conservatives he needs to worry about. It's the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. Quote, on the carbon tax in particular, the Prime Minister has tried to bait me at times with certain ad hominems and name-calling almost. But look, we have a very different opinion on the carbon tax. I wish the Prime Minister would understand that. He's being very sclerotic in his approach and on this ideological marriage that he has to this carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, will he end his ideological marriage with the carbon tax so that Canadians can eat, heat, and house themselves?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am resolute that I will fight climate change and put more money back in the pockets of Canadians right across the country. Any Premier is welcome to come forward with a plan to put a price on pollution that meets the levels required by the federal government instead of complaining. But that is what we will continue to do. We will ensure that a price on pollution that puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians, including in Newfoundland and Labrador, continues to be in place right across the country, because that's what Canadians need for a stronger future and for affordability.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirms, in fact, that 6 out of 10 Canadians pay more in carbon tax than they get back in rebates. 100% of middle class or middle quintile Canadians pay more in tax than they get back, with it being especially bad for rural and suburban Canadians. And now we have 2-year highs in gas prices all across Ontario. Ontarians punished because of a 23% carbon tax. They can thank him every time they fill up the tank. Why won't he axe the tax so that Ontarians can afford to drive to work?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Ontario is an excellent example of a jurisdiction that chose to move forward with its own cap-and-trade system so they would not be subject to the federal carbon pricing backstop. But it was the choice of a Conservative Premier to scrap the carbon pricing system that they had that took on the federal carbon pricing backstop. But that's not all bad, Mr. Speaker, because that actually puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Ontarian families, which is something that the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed repeatedly. Mr. Speaker, we're fighting climate change and putting more money back in people's pockets.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, not only I don't believe that the Prime Minister is going hand in hand with Quebec, but instead I believe that he has his hand in Quebecers' pockets. He's grossly taking advantage of the power to spend, the fiscal imbalance, and he's creating a huge deficit that Quebecers will have to be paying off for generations, with his only goal being to save his electoral skin. I want to say very clearly that I am denouncing this government and budget as a representative of Quebecers. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, it deeply wounds and surprises me to hear the Bloc Québécois denouncing a federal government. How shocking! This has been their job for decades. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to invest throughout Canada, including in Quebec, with a partnership with the Government of Quebec, to ensure that we build more housing, to invest in the healthcare system, to support Quebec's work in offering a healthcare system. We will be there to offer more childcare, to give funds to offer more childcare spots. We are partners in the well-being of Quebecers and all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to spend much time explaining to the PM what the function of an opposition is, especially since it comes very naturally to a Quebecer. The Prime Minister interferes with everything in Quebec's jurisdiction, and when Quebec wants to use a tiny piece of the Constitution, the notwithstanding clause, to protect its own jurisdiction, well, it's a scandal in the eyes of the Liberals. This Prime Minister is taking advantage of his powers to harm Quebec, and I will continue to denounce it. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I will continue as a member for Quebec to exercise my responsibilities, and also as Prime Minister of Canada. I will invest to help Canadians throughout the country. And that includes investing to create more housing in Quebec, investing in a partnership for health, to invest in opportunities for Quebecers in the years to come, invest in good jobs, good careers, in a green economy. We will be here to invest throughout the country. But the Bloc Québécois, for their part, doesn't like it.
Opposition.
Même un ancien. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Even a former NDP leader has more common sense than this Prime Minister and the current NDP leader. Tom Mulcair noted yesterday that this government will use $54.1 billion on interest payments. That means servicing the interest and payments to bankers. So that's all of the money that people pay on the GST. Everything people are paying for GST is not being used for services. It's being sent to the bankers. Does the Prime Minister really think that's okay? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Interestingly, like the Conservative Party, Thomas Mulcair was against hiking taxes on the 1% and reducing them for the middle class, as we did in 2015. And we will continue to invest to help the middle class, to help youth. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party continues to promote austerity, cuts, and it continues to help the wealthy. We, for our part, will be there to offer a fair shot at opportunity for all generations, especially youth.
The opposition.
Mr. Speaker, austerity is what people are living every day when they can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves after 9 years of this Prime Minister. But when they pay the GST, they assume that they're getting something in return. It turns out that they pay $54.1 billion in GST. And it costs them $54.1 billion in interest on the national debt. Does the Prime Minister realize that not one penny from the money Canadians pay in GST goes to valuable services? It all goes to pay wealthy bankers.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, In the face of the challenges Canadians are struggling with every single day, the solution by the Conservatives is for government to do less, to invest less in supporting Canadians, less for seniors and dental care, yes, less for child care spaces, less to invest in medical supports and in health care, less to invest in building more homes. The solution proposed by the Conservatives is for government to do less for Canadians. We are continuing to invest in people responsibly with the best, lowest debt to GDP in the G7. We will continue.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Less for bankers and bondholders, Mr. Speaker. More for doctors and nurses. This year, for the first time in over a generation, the federal government will spend more on interest for the national debt than we do on health care, after he doubled the size of the debt and grew health spending slower than the previous Conservative government. Why is it that he wants to give $54 billion hard-earned Canadian tax dollars to wealthy bankers and bondholders and not doctors and nurses?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, that would perhaps be a more credible partisan argument if it wasn't for the fact that the Conservative Party consistently stood against investments to support Canadians. The dental care program we're putting forward that's going to help already the 1.7 million seniors who've signed up, the Conservatives have not only voted against, but are busy spreading misinformation around the country to try and scare people out of that program for partisan gains. The fact is, we're going to continue to invest in child care spaces because that helps families. We're going to continue to invest in in supporting students so they have less debts. We're going to build more homes. They want.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, Canada's entrepreneurs and skilled workers are our biggest resource. We need to take advantage of their ideas, innovation, and hard work in order to keep our position at the head of the world's advanced economies. Can the Prime Minister tell the House about the new measures in the budget which will support not only our workers but also the Canadian economy? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges for his question and his hard work. Yesterday's budget included clear commitments to invest in our future and in the talents of Canadian workers. However, the Conservative leader said that he will be voting against supporting Canadian clean tech businesses, that he will be voting against our investments in AI, that he will be voting against people who are working in our EV supply chains. We are investing to help all Canadians succeed in the 21st century, but the leader of the opposition wants to bring us back to the Stone Age.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, David Dodge, proud Liberal and former Liberal appointee as Governor of the Central Bank, said that this would be the worst budget in over 40 years. It turned out he was right. We've had John Manley, who said the Prime Minister is pushing on the inflationary gas pedal, Manley being a former Liberal finance minister. Now we even have Bill Morneau condemning the government of which he was the former finance minister. Mr. Speaker, why is it that so many Liberals have come to the conclusion that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there are people like the Conservative Party of Canada that are going to choose to stand with the ultra-wealthy and not stand with young people who need better supports as we ensure more housing, more investments, more opportunities for them to succeed in an economy that is increasingly tilted towards the ultra-wealthy, away from young people and the middle class. That's why we're going to continue to step up and put money in the pockets of Canadians who need it by asking the wealthiest to pay a little bit more, something the Conservatives will continue to stand against because they stand with the ultra-wealthy.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, all the adults in the Liberal and NDP parties are saying that this budget is irresponsible. We have John Manley, former Liberal finance minister, saying this Prime Minister is pushing on the inflationary gas pedal. David Dodge, renowned Liberal, is saying it could be the worst budget in 4 decades. Bill Morneau, remember him? And before he became Bill No More, he said that this is a troubling budget, and even Tom Mulcair says that there's too much going to debt interest. Isn't this like the NDP Liberal marriage? The parents went away and the rambunctious, restless kids went and trashed the place?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition continues to focus on partisan attacks, we're going to stay focused on building a better future for Canadians. Speaking of inflation, Mr. Speaker, this is the 3rd month in a row in which inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. That is because we continue to govern responsibly in a fiscally sound way that is at the forefront of the G7, even as we step up to invest in Canadians and in their future. Confident countries invest in themselves and their people, Mr. Speaker. That is what we are doing, while the Conservatives propose to do less, to invest less, to support Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, it's not me that's doing personal or partisan attacks against this Prime Minister's agenda. It's his fellow Liberals and New Democrats. It's his coalition partner who simultaneously attacks everything he does and then enthusiastically stands up to support it. It's the Prime Minister who attacks his immigration minister for letting the system get completely out of control and then attacks himself for doubling housing costs, making life so unfair. If they're so busy attacking themselves and their own record, why don't they just call a carbon tax election so Canadians can vote them out?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker.
Excuse me. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government is making the choice to invest in a fairer future for all Canadians, for every generation. That is the choice we're making. Now, the Conservatives are continuing to choose to stand with the wealthiest in this country, choose to do less to invest in childcare, less to invest in solving the housing crisis, less to support young people across the country who need to feel the opportunities they can build in the future again. We will continue to be there to put money in the pockets of Canadians, to put homes in their communities, to build a stronger future for them and their families, while the Conservatives continue to promote cuts and austerity.
That's right.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, I've been hearing from young people in my riding that home ownership is just out of reach.
And I ask honourable members please to listen to their whips so that we could listen to the question. The honourable member from Calgary Skyview from the top.
Mr. Speaker, I've been hearing from young people in my riding that home ownership is just out of reach. Our 2024 budget puts forward the government housing plan to build more affordable homes faster and making it more affordable to buy or rent. Can the Prime Minister please share with this House how the government plans to support young people?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Calgary Skyview for his continued advocacy and his hard work. We've put forward the most ambitious housing plan in generations. Our plan will help build more student housing on or by campus, link infrastructure dollars to housing conditions to ensure new apartments are built near public transit, make it easier to save up for a down payment and qualify for a mortgage. While the Leader opposite has no real plan, we are delivering for Canadians.
That's right.
The honourable member from Port Moody Coquitlam.
$200 a month? That's what the Liberal government thinks Canadians with disabilities are worth. The Liberals said that their long overdue Canada Disability Benefit would end poverty for persons with disabilities. but what they've offered isn't even enough for groceries for a month.
Exactly.
Yet, the Liberals did manage to keep giving $60 billion to rich corporations, just like the Conservatives before them. It's unacceptable. Will the Prime Minister use his power and increase the Canada Disability Benefit immediately?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Disability Benefit is a major milestone in our strong and unwavering commitment to creating a more inclusive and fairer Canada. Mr. Speaker, there is always more to do, but $6.1 billion over the coming years is going to make a measurable difference in the lives of some of Canada's most vulnerable people. Hundreds of dollars a month, tax-free, will help with the cost of living. We recognize there's more to do. We will be working with provinces and territories to make sure, first of all, that this disability money is not clawed back, and secondly, that we can do even more in partnership with provinces and territories for Canadians with disabilities.
The Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in line with the question just asked, we were also shocked to see $200 a month, as if that would lift people in poverty, living with disabilities, it could lift them out of poverty. In what world is $200 a month enough? And at the same time, the Red Dress Alert Initiative, $1.3 million over 3 years. Stolen sisters versus stolen cars. The cars get $47 million right away. Can the Prime Minister explain, this is fair? Is this just?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government has recognized for many years that Canadians living with disabilities are facing extreme challenges and disadvantages in our economy and in our communities. That's why we've stepped up regularly over the past years with initiatives to keep Canada, to reduce barriers in Canada and to create a Canada Disability Benefit. We are now moving forward with that at the cost of over $6 billion over the coming years to put hundreds of dollars a month tax-free in the pockets of families with individuals with disability. The reality is there is always more to do, but this will help.
Yes.
That will conclude oral questions for today. Cela met fin à la période des questions pour aujourd'hui. It being 3:20, pursuant to order made on Monday, April 8, 2024, the House will now proceed to the appearance of Kristian Firth at the bar of the House. Comme il est 15h20, conformément.
It being 3:20, pursuant to order made on Monday, April 8, 2024, the House will now proceed to the appearance of Kristian Firth at the bar of the House.
Order. Colleagues, the Chair would like to make a brief statement in regard to the historic moment that is about to take place. Indeed, the last time an individual was summoned to the bar of the House to answer questions dates back to 1913, well over a century ago.
Pursuant to order made on Monday, April 8th, 2024, once Mr. Firth is escorted to the bar of the House by the Sergeant-at-Arms, the Chair shall read the admonishment. Following this, the House shall proceed to a question and answer session with Mr. Firth.
The process for questioning specified in the House order is as follows. First, questions and answers shall be addressed through the Speaker. Second, 10 minutes will be allocated to each recognized party for the first and second rounds in the following order: Liberal Party, Conservative Party, Bloc Québécois, and New Democratic Party. Troisièmement.
3. During the third round, 5 minutes will be allocated to each of the recognized party, with an additional 5 minutes for the Green Party.
Quatrièmement.
4. Within each 10 or 5 minute period of questioning, each party may allocate time to one or more of its members.
In each question and answer period, answers shall approximately reflect the time taken by the question. In addition, should Mr. Firth require a moment to consult with his counsel prior to responding to a question, or for other delays of a similar nature, the chair will stop the clock. As well as discussed with House leaders, provisions are in place for brief suspensions between the rounds of questioning to allow Mr. Firth a pause if he chooses to avail himself of them. En outre,
furthermore, as with any proceedings of the House, the Chair will decide procedural matters as they may arise. Upon completion of the questioning, the Chair will excuse Mr. Firth from further attendance at the bar, after which he shall withdraw and the House shall resume its usual business for the remainder of the sitting.
Finally, colleagues, I wish to remind members that it is incumbent upon all of us to conduct ourselves in a manner befitting of this occasion and to uphold the dignity of this House. I therefore ask for everyone's cooperation in respecting our rules of decorum.
I now ask the Sergeant-at-Arms to admit Mr. Firth at the bar of the House.
Sergeant-at-Arms to admit Mr. Firth at the bar of the House. Order. À l'ordre. Mr. Kristian Firth, please remain standing until I invite you to be seated. You are attending the bar of the House for being found in contempt for your refusal to answer certain questions and for prevaricating in your answers to other questions before the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. You are here today by order of this House for the following purposes. First, to receive an admonishment for your refusal to respond to questions posed to you by the committee. Second, to provide responses to the questions referred to in the committee's 17th report. And third, to respond to supplemental questions. The privileges of the House of Commons are enshrined in the Constitution Act 1867 and the Parliament of Canada Act. This includes the right to institute inquiries and to require the attendance of witnesses. Under the standing orders of this House, they are also exercised by its committees within their respective mandates. These privileges, enjoyed by the House collectively and by members individually, are essential in the discharge of our duties. The House has the power and indeed the obligation to reaffirm them when obstruction or interference impedes the House's proceedings and the ability of members to carry out their parliamentary duties. That is precisely what the House has ordered the Speaker, as a guardian of these rights and privileges, to do today. To reprimand you, to reprimand your contempt for refusing to answer questions put to you by the committee and prevaricating other questions. For all these reasons, on behalf of the House of Commons, I admonish you. In addition, the House orders you to respond to the questions you refuse to answer in committee, in whole or in part, and to respond to any supplementary questions. Monsieur Kristian Firth.
Mr. Firth, you have been attending the bar of the House for being found in contempt for your refusal to answer certain questions and for prevaricating in your answers to other questions before the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. You are here today by order of the House for the following purposes. 1. To receive an admonishment for your refusal to respond to questions posed to you by the committee. 2. To provide responses to the questions referred to in the committee's 17th report. And 3. To respond to supplementary questions. The privileges of the House of Commons are enshrined in the Constitution Act 1867 and the Parliament of Canada Act. This includes the right to institute inquiries and to require the attendance of witnesses. Under the standing orders of the House, they are also exercised by its committees within their respective mandates. These privileges enjoyed by the House collectively and by members individually are essential in the discharge of our duties. The House has the power and indeed the obligation to reaffirm them when obstruction or interference impedes the House's proceedings and the ability of members to carry out their parliamentary duties. That is precisely what the House has ordered the Speaker, as the guardian of these rights and privileges, to do today. To reprimand your contempt for refusing to answer questions put to you by the committee and for prevaricating other questions. For all these reasons, on behalf of the House of Commons, I admonish you. In addition, the House orders you to respond to the questions you refuse to answer in committee, in whole or in part, and to respond to any supplementary questions. Mr. Firth.
That you must answer all questions that are posed of you. I would also like to remind you and everyone listening that everything you say as part of these proceedings is protected by parliamentary privilege and cannot be used against you in any other forum. Mr.
Firth, I would like to remind you that you must answer all questions that are posed to you. I would also like to remind you and everyone listening that everything you say as part of these proceedings is protected by parliamentary privilege and cannot be used against you in any other forums.
The Chair is aware that you've been briefed on this process. La présidence sait que le processus.
The Chair is aware that you have been briefed on this process.
You may now be seated. Vous pouvez vous asseoir.
You may now be seated.
The House will now proceed with its questions. La Chambre.
The House will now proceed with its questions.
The House will now proceed to the first round of questions. Each recognized party will have 10 minutes. La Chambre procédera maintenant.
The House will now proceed to the first round of questions. Each recognized party will have 10 minutes.
I wish to remind honourable members again that all questions are to be addressed through the Chair. Avant de commencer,
before we proceed, I wish to remind honourable members that all questions are to be addressed through the Chair.
L'honorable leader du gouvernement.
The Honourable Leader of the Government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Could Mr. Firth inform the House as to whether he consulted with a medical professional prior to his appearance today regarding answering questions from the House?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I did. I consulted yesterday.
Monsieur l'Honorable Ministre.
Mr. Speaker, is Mr. Firth comfortable sharing what the doctor told him?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I am. I'm supposed to not participate in any activity that would cause any undue stress to myself, as being diagnosed with having acute mental health flare-ups, actively under therapy, and also on medication.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, was the information about Mr. Firth's medical condition shared with the House of Commons administration?
Mr. Firth.
Sorry, can you answer the question again, please?
Certainly, by all means.
The Honourable, one moment. Just want to make sure the time. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Was the information about Mr. Firth's medical condition shared with the House of Commons administration?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we shared it with the clerk.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this information is consistent with what was shared with all recognized parties yesterday individually by the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Counsel, that Mr. Firth's health is fragile and that a doctor has provided a note recommending that Mr. Firth does not participate in activities such as the questioning today for mental and physical health reasons. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, this information is consistent with what has been communicated yesterday by the Council and to all recognized party that Mr. Firth's health is fragile and that a doctor has provided a note recommending that Mr. Firth do not participate in activities such as the questioning today for mental and physical health reasons.
That Mr. Firth understands that he will have to answer questions and is prepared to do so once his health allows it. I want to be crystal clear. We believe that what happened with the ArriveCan app is unacceptable. We want to assure that all unanswered questions receive answers. That is an important principle of this House. That is why we supported the motion that brings Mr. Firth here today. We want to get to the bottom of this issue, and we want to ensure that committees are respected. Je tiens à être très clair.
I want to be very clear. We consider that what has happened with the ArriveCan app is unacceptable. We want to ensure that all the questions that have been unanswered will get an answer. This is an important principle of the House. That is why we supported the motion that has brought Mr. Firth here today. We want to get to the bottom of the situation, and we want to ensure that the committees are respected.
All recognized parties were individually informed of options to delay the questioning component of today's proceedings until Mr. Firth has been medically cleared to participate, and only the Conservatives refused. On this side of the House, we do not believe that it is appropriate to question Mr. Firth if he is not medically able to participate. We want this to be done in a way that respects the dignity of Parliament, and forcing someone against medical advice to do something that a doctor believes could harm their treatment and recovery is indeed beneath the dignity of this place.
We want this to happen with respect for dignity of Parliament, and forcing somebody against their doctor's advice to do something that, according to the doctor, could undermine their treatment and their healing is not worthy of this House.
Demonstration of his character, and Canadians should pay careful attention.
Liberal corruption.
You're a bunch of heartless people.
It's not helpful. The Honourable Government House Leader.
I'll repeat the last sentence, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition is...
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr.
Sorry,
Chair,
the honourable member from South
the
Surrey, White
government
Rock.
House Leader is purposely causing disorder in this House. You just asked every person here to keep their conduct calm and within the dignity of the House for these extraordinary proceedings. He is saying things that were in a medical certificate that weren't there, because we had House Leaders' discussion on this, and now he is using the opportunity to attack the official opposition. This is inappropriate, and it causes discord in this House, and it will cause disruption on a continuing basis. I ask you, Mr. Speaker, to please ask the government House Leader to conduct himself within the dignity and within the four squares of this extraordinary situation and not continue down this path. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable from South Surrey White Rock for raising this issue. I see that the Honourable Member from Regina Capel is also rising on his feet for point of order.
On the same point of order, I think it's very important for you to understand how we got here. It is important to know that the witness was offered accommodations that have been granted, and that should there be further accommodations requested in terms of breaks or any type of need to consult with any professional, that we have signaled our absolute cooperation with that. These are very similar to the accommodations that the witness requested when it took months for him to respond to a committee invitation and further summons. These were the same accommodations that were provided when he finally did testify just recently, Mr. Speaker, and that is how we arrived at where we are today. I believe the dignity of this House, the ability for parliamentarians to do their jobs on behalf of taxpayers. On behalf of the taxpayers, many of whom lost every single cent they had during the lockdown, on behalf of the thousands of Canadians who were ordered into quarantine because of this app, it's essential we can...
I thank the member from Regina Capel. I thank the member from South Surrey White Rock for raising these points, and I would like to emphasize to all members the importance of us conducting ourselves. Canadians are clearly watching this historic event, and they would expect us to conduct ourselves befitting to the occasion. With that in mind, I invite the Honourable Government House Leader to finish his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, you have pointed out in your remarks earlier just how unprecedented this is. We supported this initiative, but we regret that it's come to this. And when we received the information that all parties were privy to, we made what I think is the responsible decision. And I think what you've just seen across the aisle is very confirmation of what I've been saying. Thank you very much.
I will take it then that we will move on to the next series of questions. The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, the Arrive can was supposed to cost taxpayers $80,000, but the NDP Liberal government rewarded consultants and insiders who got rich on taxpayer dollars for an app that nobody wanted. The app erroneously forced more than 10,000 people under house arrest. It didn't work, and the Auditor General said it cost at least $60 million. ArriveCan is now under 13 federal investigations. 2 middlemen that do no IT work got rich in a corrupt system under this NDP Liberal government. Some, including the witness today, became multimillionaires. GC Strategies is a 2-person company, and they claim to find people who actually do the work by using LinkedIn. Nearly $20 million for ArriveCan is what they were paid, and roughly $2,500 per hour. They've been paid $100 million since forming GC Strategies just after this Liberal Prime Minister was elected. This is 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister. The Liberal government has been ordered to collect and recoup all funds paid to ArriveCan contractors and subcontractors that did no work on the ArriveCan app. My question, Speaker, has the government asked Mr. Firth to repay the money paid to GC Strategies on ArriveCan?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, they have not.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The procurement watchdog found numerous examples where GC Strategies, quote, had simply copied and pasted, end quote, information to prove the people GC Strategies found to do work on ArriveCan actually did it. Question, has the government asked GC Strategies to repay the money paid to GC Strategies for ArriveCan?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the numbers that were provided by the Ombudsman and from Public Works we found were inaccurate when we did our assessments. And secondly, we have not been asked to pay any money back.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
For how many contracts did GC Strategies copy and paste the exact same information?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we've never copied and pasted to win any contract.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, we know from committee testimony that Mr. Firth has admitted to doing exactly that. Today, media reports that Mr. Firth's property was raided by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. What crime are they investigating?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, that's correct. There was a search warrant, not an arrest warrant, for my property to obtain electronic goods surrounding the Butler allegations.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have also confirmed that GC Strategies and ArriveCan are under police investigation. Has the RCMP contacted Mr. Firth about those allegations related specifically to this Prime Minister's $60 million Arrive scam?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the RCMP has only reached out to us regarding Butler.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
In the search of Mr. Firth's home, did the RCMP take only electronic devices, or were there documents, cell phones, or any other information?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't at my premises when the search was being taken, so I cannot comment on that. I don't have that information.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Does Mr. Firth know if the property of his partner Darren Anthony has been searched by the RCMP?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, as of this morning, it had not.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
GC Strategies is two guys in a basement taking 30% commissions on multi-million-dollar contracts that they had no value to, but have endorsements from senior NDP Liberal government officials. On the endorsements, question, who was the Government of Canada Chief Information Officer who offered a quote?
Mr. Firth. Mr. Firth, you need time to consult with your counsel.
Yes, please.
The clock is stopped. Mr. Firth? The clock is still stopped. Could you please repeat the question to the honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes?
Speaker, GC Strategies is two guys in a basement taking 30% commissions on multi-million-dollar contracts that they had no value to, but have endorsements from senior NDP Liberal government officials. On
point of order, the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby is rising on his feet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would appreciate the official opposition to approach this with some dignity. There is no NDP Liberal government. So I would expect that he would ask his questions in the appropriate form, please, through you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby. Indeed, that is the case. I will ask the honourable member if he could just reframe his question. It's a pertinent question as it is. The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island, Rideau Lakes.
This company has done no work on the multi-million-dollar contracts that they've been given by this Liberal government, supported by the NDP. On the endorsements on their website, who was the Government of Canada Chief Information Officer who provided an endorsement?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we gave that information over, and the name was Paul Girard.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Are all of the subcontractors that GC Strategies uses Canadian companies?
Mr. Firth. Can you write it down?
Mr. Speaker, can I get clarification? Is that period or during the ArriveCan application?
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Subcontractors used on Government of Canada contracts.
Mr. Firth.
Every company that we represent and we work with for government contracts have valid Canadian security clearances.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, not an answer to the question that I asked. Does Mr. Firth have any knowledge or involvement in the reviews for the ArriveCan app on either the Apple Store or the Google Play Store being artificially amplified or paid for? Any knowledge at all?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I know those services exist, but I have no knowledge whether or not they are executed.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes.
Bring my time to the member for Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek, please.
The honourable member from Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek, has 4 minutes left.
Mr. Speaker, the Procurement Ombudsman found that 76% of resources named in bids on the ArriveCan contracts did no work and were switched out for other companies. He termed this the bait and switch, which is often used to sub out expensive subcontractors for cheaper ones, allowing the middlemen to take home more profit. Did Mr. Firth switch out any of his proposed resources on the ArriveCan application contracts?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we were part of the 24% that didn't. Every resource we proposed that were called up for task authorizations were given to the Government of Canada.
The honourable member from Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, through you, has Mr. Firth ever engaged in bait and switch in any of his contracts with the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we were asked to replace resources all the time, depending on if there's discrepancies with their experience, whether they're not working very well, or whether or not they need to move on to another project. They're contractors, so we replace resources frequently under the guidance of the client.
The honourable member from Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek. But before she continues, I would like to let you know that we've discovered a little discrepancy in the time. She'll have an additional 30 seconds. So she has 3 minutes left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General found in her ArriveCan report that Mr. Firth sat at the table with public servants to draft the requirements for a contract worth $25 million that he was later awarded, and thereby was setting the price. Through you, what are the names of those public servants?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, that name was provided in the questions, and the government official's name was Diane Daly.
The honourable member from Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That is in direct contradiction to the name that was submitted by Mr. Firth as a direct answer to this question from me at a committee last month. Why is the answer changing today?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the question posed to me was who did I speak with in May of 2022 prior to the contract award, and that was the procurement lady, which was the name I gave. But subsequently there was a question by Mr. Genius that was posed very similar to the honourable members, and that was who was I engaged with at CBSA when discussing suggestions, and that was Diane Daly.
The honourable member from Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General also found that the CBSA advised KPMG, a multinational consulting firm, that they would be a subcontractor under his two-person middleman company. At committee, the Deputy Auditor General confirmed this would allow Mr. Firth and GC Strategies to take an additional 20% cut of the contract, despite not even doing the work to get them as a subcontractor? How many times have public servants provided him with subcontractors?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It is common for, once you have an existing contract in place, for a client to engage your services to help bring on a subject matter expert that they wouldn't otherwise have access to, or typically, because contracting takes quite a long time, to actually bring them in if it's a time-sensitive deliverable.
The honourable member from Carleton Trail Eagle Creek has 30 seconds left.
Mr. Speaker, I will take that to mean that the public servants have provided him with subcontractors many times. Thank you.
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm not being elusive. I do not know the answer to that question.
Thank the honourable member.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to start these questions by touching once again upon some parts of my speech last week. Unfortunately, we are facing a historic situation caused by various problems. For example, the inconsistency of some information that we received, some information that was inconsistent within itself and also with information received from other sources. In addition, it has taken a great deal of time to receive written responses and requested documents. In some cases, the delay was up to 18 months. That said, I would add that the answers were received, although only after a great deal of delay and insistence. But nonetheless, they were in the end received, these answers. As I was saying, my questions today aim to understand processes, to understand gaps within the public service and its workings and procedures. I am not a court, and I have no intention of being one. I do not want this to turn into a court of popular opinion. I would invite people to focus on our role, finding the flaws in the system, in the organization, in processes, all of this in order to then fix the problems. I would add that, crucially, these flaws are nothing new. Many processes were implemented many years ago by the minister at the time, the Conservative minister, Ms. Ambrose. My first question. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know what skills and training were required in order to become a talent recruiter. I will ensure that Mr. Firth has heard the interpretation, and that will not take away from the honourable member's time.
Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I believe I understood the question. There's a series of things. There's building a network that can be just a few years of experience, working with clients, working with resources, understanding their skill sets, understanding their availability, understanding what their per diems are. There's a lot of things that have to be put into place to understand if somebody is perfect for a role. And again, are they the right experience? Are they the right skill set? And then on top of that as well, it's understanding how they respond to RFPs. We're a small shop. I mean, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody here. So myself and my business partner, we had to understand how to look for RFPs on buy and sell, how to respond to them, how to recruit for them, and then how to fulfill our obligations once the contracts be awarded. And then invoicing, timesheets, everything that goes from a 360 desk.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's hard to make a name for yourself within a giant government apparatus. So I'd like to know, Mr. Speaker, how the Witnesses Company became a benchmark for government talent recruitment.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the question. I'm not sure we're recognized as a benchmark. We were in a good position to respond and help with the ArriveCan application, with having resources already on the ground, already having them CBSA security cleared, which in itself takes a long time. But that's not typical. It was at that point we were I believe we beat out competition from 2 to 3 other firms. We also, you heard in testimony recently from AWS, Microsoft, and BDO that they didn't have the capacity to build the app. So although I understand it may look like we're the benchmark, we are not recognized as the benchmark with the federal government.
The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, going back to well before ArriveCan, at the very beginning of GC Strategies, as a recognized business by the Government of Canada, how did things take place? How was the company able to make its mark?
Mr. Speaker, actually for the first 2 years GC Strategies was in business, we actually were building corporate requirements. We were trying to get onto supply arrangements like TBIPs and SBIPs and ProServe and all the mechanisms to go after business. I mean, granted, they were bluebirds, which is basically means you had no idea these things were hitting the street. And then shortly after winning the first 2 or 3, you then start getting corporate requirements. People start identifying you as being, good at one thing, good at all the other. And then at that point, you start building credibility and so forth.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. And I would just state that she has 4 minutes and 45 seconds left. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if I'm understanding correctly, the first few contracts received by the witness were received before fully understanding what would happen. If I remember correctly, these were in 2015. So despite the fact that the witness did not know entirely what the processes were, he still received contracts. I'd like to better understand this, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I understood what the process was for responding to RFPs, but for the first 2 years we were working in building our credibility through other companies, through like being asked from other subs for working with private sector, and at that point we've built the confidence in our network and understanding how many resources we had access to with specific skill sets that we felt comfortable going after the RFPs that were being put out by the federal government.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know if the witness thinks that government officials, especially with ArriveCan, abided by the rules, procedures and policies connected with their strategic privileged position within the state apparatus and the awarding of contracts from which he profited.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Can I please have that question repeated?
I'm going to start the clock. Madame la députée de Beauport.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to know if the witness believes that government officials abided by the rules, procedures, and policies connected with their strategic privileged position within the government in awarding contracts to GC Strategies.
Mr. Speaker, again, without sounding elusive, and that's not why I'm here at all, I don't have the answer. I cannot comment on that. I'm not privy to every meeting that happens and every conversation that happens.
The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, I understand that the witness does not understand the rules of the public service, but the officials with whom he was in contact, did any of them say that they could not do certain things because, as officials, this did not abide by the rules?
Mr. Speaker, no, they did not.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General mentioned that members of GC Strategies drew up the criteria for contracts for the contract that they themselves won. I'd like to ask the witness if he believes that a business that draws up criteria should not withdraw from the call for tenders.
Mr. Speaker, previous testimony that came from Amazon and Microsoft last week, I believe it is common practice to offer suggestions, because typically clients aren't always best informed when it comes to writing RFPs or putting requirements together. Whether it's cloud computing for Amazon or Microsoft, it is common for government officials or technical resources to ask specific suggestions, understanding what skill sets and what technologies that they have to be privy with to be working on application or working on projects.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou has 60 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From what I understand from these answers to my last questions, it seems to me that the public service at the present time feels obliged to find certain specialized consultants because it is not able to determine the criteria for its own needs. So there seems to be a lack of specialization, a lack of specialists, a lack of training. But I would add that it is not logical for a company that has worked at drawing up criteria should be able to bid for a contract with those criteria. This is something that government officials should carry out. And this is something that any businesses that want to bid for a contract should avoid. I'd like to thank the honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou for her questions.
To the honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley, who has 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too am struck by the historic nature of this moment and keenly aware of our responsibility, a sacred responsibility, to not only seek answers on behalf of Canadians, but to ensure that we are not doing undue harm to the individual who's here before us, and that we're conducting ourselves in a way that upholds the integrity, the dignity, and the credibility of this place that lies at the heart of our democracy. And I'll certainly try, Mr. Speaker, to uphold those values in my questioning. We're here because of the serious allegations and revelations surrounding the procurement and the execution of the ArriveCan app, a piece of technology that incorrectly required thousands of Canadians to quarantine, a piece of technology that cost some $60 million, and a piece of technology that was procured in a way that both the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombudsman have found was highly irregular and likely connected to misconduct on the part of the government officials who were responsible. There are two main questions of substance that I believe we were seeking answers to today. The first dealt with Mr. Firth's misleading of the committee when it came to the question of whether he had met with government officials outside of work. And the first time that that question was raised at committee, Mr. Firth replied in the negative, that he had not met with officials outside of work, and then later provided documentation that showed he had met with 3 officials at some half a dozen Ottawa restaurants and breweries. My first question, Mr. Speaker, through to Mr. Firth, is why he chose to mislead the committee in the first instance.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm fully endorsing the abolishment and understanding that there was questions that may have not been answered correctly, and understanding that some of them may have been obtuse, and that's why I'm here today, and we'll be answering all questions like I have been since the last 45 minutes, honestly and to the best of my knowledge.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, the question as originally asked at committee was a simple yes or no question. had the individual met with government officials outside of work? And Mr. Firth replied that no, he had not. My question, which was not provided with an answer, was why he chose in that moment to mislead the committee.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, at that time, I didn't know how many, so rather than give a fake answer, I didn't know exactly how many people I'd met with. I've been doing this for 16 years.
Mr. Speaker,
the honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Speaker, the question was not how many government officials or how many times. The question was a yes or no question. Had Mr. Firth met with government officials outside of work? Why did he refuse to answer that question? Why did he answer that question? Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Why did he mislead the committee by answering that question in the negative? Why?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, at that time, I thought I did answer it correctly.
The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
I have a very difficult time accepting that answer and believing that answer to be the truth. The other question of substance that I believe we were here to seek an answer to is which government official, Mr. Firth, discussed the criteria for a contract that he was eventually awarded. And I believe he's provided that name as being Diane Daly. Can Mr. Firth confirm that that is indeed the government official with whom he discussed the contract criteria?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that.
The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I think for Canadians watching, this is really the most troubling of the allegations, that Mr. Firth, on behalf of his company, was involved in setting the rules and the criteria for a contract, a multi-million-dollar contract, that strangely enough, his firm was eventually awarded. To most Canadians, this would look like, and I won't exaggerate, it would look like a rigged system that is designed to benefit Ottawa insiders and make it more difficult for entrepreneurs and small businesses in this country to do work for the government. Does Mr. Firth not agree?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the RFP, the contract that's in question, had over 220 requirements involved in there. We offered up 3 suggestions, what still PSPC deemed 40 qualified vendors could respond to, and of which 10 showed interest. So I don't see that as overly restrictive.
The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, both the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombudsman found that the criteria for that contract were set in such a restrictive way that only GC Strategies could have been selected as the successful bidder. Does Mr. Firth not agree that that process is profoundly unfair?
Mr. Firth. Mr. Speaker, I kind of find the Ombudsman's comments to be somewhat subjective after the fact. I cannot comment for why the other 39 people did not respond. People are busy, they're sometimes out of the bandwidth, and also for the Auditor General to understand that we would be the only people that could respond to this. There's 635 other vendors out there with corporate requirements, and there's probably 10,000, 12,000 resources out there with technical requirements. Unless they're familiar with all of those, it's hard again to assume that we were the only people qualified to win this.
The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are deeply troubled by the allegations and revelations surrounding the ArriveCan app. Could Mr. Firth, in his own words, describe what those concerns are precisely?
Mr. Firth.
Actually, no, I don't think I can, Mr. Speaker. Being honest, I don't know the allegations and accusations around the ArriveCan app. We used the first 3 national security exemption contracts. Actually, only 2 of them, the first and the third, was used to build the ArriveCan application. So, again, not being disrespectful, either I don't understand the question, but I think I'm answering you honestly.
The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
At committee, Mr. Speaker, when Mr. Firth was asked about which government official he discussed contract criteria with, he refused to answer, citing the fact that the RCMP were now involved at some level in looking into the circumstances surrounding the ArriveCan app. And yet, the rules of Parliament and the laws of Canada do not accept that as a valid reason to refuse to answer a question of Parliament. Does Mr. Firth accept the fact that the rules required him at the time to provide a full answer to our questions at committee?
Mr. Firth?
Mr. Speaker, as a result of my abolishment and understanding that I do now.
The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, in an internal investigation report by the company Bottler AI, there's a characterization of communication with Mr. Firth in which he is discussing the exorbitant commissions charged by his company for the work done by subcontractors. And in those communications, he is alleged to have said that it, quote, sucks for Canada, unquote. Does Mr. Firth recall making those comments?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I've not seen any of that content. I cannot recall saying that at all.
The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, given that Mr. Firth is now brought before the bar of Parliament for only the second time in our country's history, given the grave concerns of Canadians, I wonder if there's anything that he would have done differently in his initial committee appearances to avoid the situation he now finds himself in.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, absolutely. I would have answered the questions more concisely, taken more time in giving the answers, and putting all written information back to the committee faster.
A very brief question to the honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Speaker, earlier Mr. Firth said that no one has asked him to pay back the commission that he earned. I would ask that given that the Auditor General found the government overpaid for the ArriveCAN app, given that the app itself didn't work and sent thousands to quarantine incorrectly, given that the Auditor General has called the record keeping around those contracts some of the worst that she has ever seen, given that 76% of the subcontractors did zero or little work, and given that GC Strategies bills itself as a recruitment firm but doesn't recruit, given all of that and the fact that Mr. Firth took $2.5 million in commission for very little work, will he give that money back?
Mr. Firth, a very brief answer, please.
Mr. Speaker, we were the 24%, we were not the 76%, and we did recruit over 50 people to work on the ArriveCAN application, over 100 people in totality at CBSA, and the answer is we did as we were told. We invoiced monthly. At any time we could have been stopped. We were given $20 million and then walked away and built an app. This was not our app. We were paid to recruit and find resources who built the app within 20 days and did subsequent new releases for 18 months, and on time and on budget.
This concludes the first round of questioning. Mr. Firth, would you like a pause before the House proceeds to the next round?
Mr. Speaker, yes, please.
La séance est suspendue.
The sitting is suspended until the call of the chair.
Anyone new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Yeah, he's definitely holding back information, and the Liberals tried to squash the whole thing, so that looks suspicious all in itself. They should be back quite quickly, actually. They normally, if they suspend like this it's very short. All right, so what do you guys think? You think that the Liberals are trying to cover this up? Or are they actually being sincere about Kristian having mental problems and needing to take a break from questioning and not be questioned any further. Let me know what you think in the comments. The bell is going. It's about to start.
The sitting will now resume.
Before we continue with our business, there is some other business that I have to get done. It is my duty, pursuant to Standing Order 38, to inform the House that questions to be raised tonight at the time of adjournment are as follows. Conformément à la
Pursuant to Standing Order 38, it is my duty to inform the House that the questions to be raised tonight at the time of adjournment are as follows.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge. The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre. And the Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grasslands. The House will now proceed to the second round of questions. La Chambre procédera maintenant.
The House will now proceed to the second round of questions. Each recognized party will have 10 minutes.
We'll have 10 minutes. I wish to remind honourable members that all questions are to be addressed through the chair. J'aimerais rappeler aux honorables.
I wish to remind honourable members that all questions are to be addressed through the chair.
L'honorable leader.
The Honourable Leader of the Government. We will move on to the Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know first from the witness, what are the Butler allegations that led to the search of the residence by the RCMP?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of the allegations. There were 6 points on the search warrant, and I think they weren't very specific to any specific allegation. But from previous testimonies, I'm understanding that it was fraudulent billing and resume fraud.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable.
Monsieur le Président, le témoin Firth est ici à la suite du scandale libéral de l'application Arrive-Can du Premier ministre, une application qui devait coûter 80 000 $, qui en a coûté 60 millions. Est-ce que le gouvernement libéral, qui a versé des dizaines de millions de dollars pour du travail qui n'a pas été fait, vous a contacté?
Pay. The Honourable Member for is rising on a point of order. There is no interpretation into English.
The member's question.
May I ask colleagues, was there English translation for the first question? But not for the second. All right.
Could anyone tell me whether the system is working now? I would ask the member for Mégantic-l'Érable to begin his second question again. Thank you. Witness Firth is here following the Liberal Prime Minister's ArriveCan scandal, an app that was supposed to cost $80,000. It ended up costing $60 million. Did the Liberal government, which was cheated out of tens of millions of dollars for work that wasn't done, ask you to repay it or contact you about how to do it?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I was not contacted.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Witness Firth either refused to answer questions or lied to the Parliamentary Committee after we learned that the Prime Minister's government made him a multimillionaire at the expense of taxpayers. Can the witness confirm that he never lied in the Parliamentary Committee?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, acknowledging the fact that I'm being admonished, right, making history right now, I think I've acknowledged the fact I made mistakes in previous committees.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, can Mr. Firth tell us when he lied exactly?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the exact information. Again, I'm not being elusive. I just can't allude to which questions and what time and which month.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, I understand that the witness lied on a number of occasions in committee, and that is why we are here today to try to discover the truth. Can Mr. Firth confirm that he avoided naming his sources within the Liberal government to protect his business model, which results from the Liberal government's lax approach to procurement?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I didn't.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Can Mr. Firth confirm that the 3 quotes on the GC Strategies website were anonymous at the request of the authors of those quotes?
Mr. Firth?
I can confirm that was requested.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Did these individuals derive any benefit from allowing GC Strategies to use their comments anonymously?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, they did not.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. I apologize for the delay, but my microphone was not turned on, so I didn't hear the answer. The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, I'll be sharing my time with the member for Calgary-Midnapore.
From Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth just admitted that the RCMP raided his house relative to Bottler AI. When Mr. Firth introduced Bottler AI to his consultant colleague, Mr. Von Brennan, he had them email Mr. Jeremy Broadhurst, the former Chief of Staff for the Minister of Finance and the current Liberal campaign chair. Did Mr. Brennan regularly set up Mr. Firth's contacts with elected officials, ministers, and their chiefs of staff?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, that's news to me. I've never engaged Von Brennan to get any meetings with senior government officials.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Firth aware that Mr. Brennan's wife works for Procurement Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I was as of the third testimony when that was brought to light, but until then I was not aware of it.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
What benefits did Mr. Von Brennan provide Mr. Firth for that furthered their professional relationship?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, Von Brennan never provided anything outside of just the work we would give him on a per diem time and material basis for a government department.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth submitted that he was meeting with government officials outside of government offices. Where did Mr. Firth meet Paul Girard, former CIO of TBS?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I've met Paul Girard at Starbucks on 99 Metcalfe.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
What did Mr. Firth discuss at this meeting?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, with Mr. Girard's position, and I had 2 contracts within his directorate, it was just understanding if how the contracts were going, thanking the resources were performing well, understanding if there are any issues, and I think just general Chief Information Officer duties.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Where did Mr. Firth meet Monsieur Philippe Johnston, former CIO at NRC?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, could Baton Rouge, that was underneath where his department was, or it could have been a coffee shop?
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
What did Mr. Firth discuss at this meeting?
Mr. Firth.
So, Mr. Speaker, at that time is very similar to Mr. Girard. We had contracts within Mr. Johnson's department, and I think it was just a health check on the contracts, making sure that my resources were performing. If they weren't, then they'd let me know this and we'd replace them.
30 seconds left to the honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Firth has made connections and met with public servants for over a decade, wining and dining them for contracts. Officials became comfortable with the system. Officials allowed Mr. Firth to charge millions because they weren't willing to follow the rules and used Mr. Firth as their way easily out of accountability. Through you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth, who are you protecting in this corrupt system?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not protecting anybody. I'm just going about my business like an IT staffing firm does.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, all my questions will be through you. Did Mr. Firth review the content of the search warrant executed on his house yesterday?
Mr. Firth.
Yeah, I skimmed through the 6 pages, yes.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Did the search warrant specify a forgery pursuant to 366 of the Criminal Code and fraud pursuant to Section 380 of the Criminal Code of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I skimmed through, and to answer honestly, I cannot give that answer accurately.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Firth admitted that he altered 2 resumes, replacing a 2-month internship with 51 months of professional experience. On another occasion, he inflated 7 years of experience to 12. He claimed that this was a mistake. He didn't have consent to manipulate the resumes. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we've mentioned this previously in previous testimonies, but we encourage the RCMP to do investigation into the Bottler allegations, whether it's fraud over 5,000, because we believe it's going to exonerate us.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
He clearly didn't answer the question. I'll move on. How many other times has Mr. Firth altered materials and resumes to the government since 2015?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it's a common practice to engage with a resource, understand, because not everybody's CV or resume completely aligns with requirements that are coming out. They may have the experience, but we just have to speak with them to qualify that.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
I'm asking for the number, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have a number.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Firth's actions amounted to forgery under the criminal code. He altered resumes to secure government contracts, thereby fleecing the Canadian taxpayer. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the allegations regarding the Butler resumes were on a contract that had already been awarded. So these were task authorizations. No contract would have been decided either way by these resumes. It was one business.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Firth's actions further constituted a fraud on the Government of Canada. Section 380 of the Code stipulates that everyone who by deceit, falsehood, or other fraudulent means defrauds the public of any property, money, or valuable security. Both offences are punishable by indictment, and upon conviction, he could face a maximum prison sentence of 10 to 14 years. Is he aware of that?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, we're looking forward to the investigation by the RCMP because we believe it'll exonerate us.
I'd like to let the honourable member from Brantford Brant know that he has 25 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Firth's actions were not accidental but intentional. This was not a mistake. He knew his resource would not qualify for taxpayer monies without manipulating their experience. Does Mr. Firth think that the Prime Minister or the Liberal Cabinet Minister should be at the bar answering questions today instead of himself, or is he willing to go to jail for them?
The Honourable, Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, can I speak to my counsel, please?
Mr. Firth?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not even sure what the question is there.
Yeah, neither are we.
I wish to inform the honourable member that his time has elapsed. Let us have the... Well, I have to... The honourable member from Brantford Brant, I'd like to inform him, and we will be able to show him this on the record. But actually, by the time you had finished your question, you had already elapsed the time that you had had.
I respect that, Mr. Speaker. He clearly indicated he didn't understand the question. In terms of fairness to Mr. Firth, he should be afforded an opportunity to be rephrasing the question, perhaps slower, so we can understand it and respond accordingly. Point of order. Point of order.
The honourable member, the honourable deputy government house leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You started off today about talking about the importance of decorum, and I do not think it's appropriate for the member opposite to be challenging the Speaker when the rules, as you expressed them, were very clear. The time has expired. That means we move on to the next person, and he should not be challenging this chair.
I appreciate the intervention from the Deputy Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader. I'm going to take a moment to consult on this matter. The chair is going to permit the honourable member from Brantford Brant to please put a question within 10 seconds so that the witness, Mr. Firth, can answer the question.
Does Mr. Firth think that he should be solely responsible for this scam, or should the Prime Minister, the Liberal cabinet ministers, and certain members of the Liberal backbench should be at this bar facing consequences, legal consequences?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, again, I don't want to be elusive. I can't comment on this. That's kind of speculative, and I'm not sure what I can do here.
L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, far be it from me to defend the Canadian Parliament. After all, it's an institution that I would like Quebec to no longer owe anything to one day. But I do want to defend the principles that are embodied by this Parliament, respecting democratic institutions and the parliamentary democracy that Quebec is part of. A few weeks ago, the Auditor General's office tabled a report on the management of the ArriveCAN app. According to her, the Auditor General, the management of this application was the worst she had seen in her career. It was supposed to cost $80,000 and in the end cost $60 million. Also in the AG report, we learned that a two-person business whose owner is here now pocketed more than $19 million for this project. That company, GC Strategies. We also learned that this ArriveCAN file was only the tip of the iceberg. Recently, it was revealed that GC Strategies and its forerunner, Corridor Systems Consulting, received nearly $108 million in contracts from 2011. And manual searches found more additional contracts. We also learned in the AG report and others that there were various other things like whiskey tastings, dinners, golf tournaments, and others. These social occasions involved both Kristian Firth, the witness here today, and government officials. So it's perfectly healthy in a self-respecting democracy that parliamentarians who are responsible for ensuring that the state apparatus works well, it's completely appropriate that they closely examine what happened to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And that is why the owners of GC Strategies were asked to appear at committee on multiple occasions. Mr. Kristian Firth refused to answer numerous questions and compromised parliamentarians' work by not sending requested documents within a reasonable time. He even lied at committee, and he refused to send a list of public servants that he did business with. He did send it just now, but it is not complete, according to what we heard at committee. It's very clear that this points to major problems at the level of procurement. For nearly 50 years, it's been so hard to pre-select companies for the government to do business with that SMEs that don't actually offer any service of their own end up receiving commissions to indirectly put the government into contact with the companies that will actually do the work. It's completely absurd, Mr. Speaker. And here we have a person who profited from a broken system and pushed that to an extreme. I'll give an example. When the CBSA identified KPMG as being a business that it wanted to work with and that was already in the list of pre-approved businesses, CBSA contacted KPMG and the work was going to be done, but then a CBSA public servant called KPMG to announce that there would be an intermediary in the contract, which was GC Strategies. And we learned that Mr. Kristian Firth met with KPMG in that file, and that's exactly the problem, Mr. Speaker. It's that Kristian Firth and his two-person business did not deliver even the service that they said they would, a headhunting service, a recruitment service, that they did nothing, and that nonetheless they pocketed $84,000. So my question for Mr. Firth, does he think that taxpayers got value for their money for this $84,000?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the question. The reality is this is common practice for people with existing contracts. They get subcontractors to come through their company because typically the time to procure directly, even if you're an existing one of the 635 vendors that could do work with the government, it takes too long. So again, I was not aware of the file and what the urgency was and the deliverables, but I did know that there was timelines were very tight. So my assumption, again, this is being speculative, was they were leveraging the contract that I had because it needed to be done quickly.
The honourable member for Talbot. Mr. Speaker, based on what we heard at committee, public servants were doing their they're doing best for contracts to be granted quickly, which is why in certain cases there were uncompetitive RFPs. So once again, we're hearing contradictory things. According to Mr. Firth, why didn't this public servant just pick up the phone, call KPMG? Why did they instead tell KPMG that there would be an intermediary who would get $84,000 for doing nothing? Why does he think the public servant did that?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, not being elusive, I can't comment on why somebody picked up the phone in a government organisation and made a call.
The honourable member for Talbot. Mr. Speaker, does Mr. Firth have a number in mind for the value of gifts in kind or money that was offered to public servants in exchange for contracts?
Mr. Speaker, yeah, that number is zero.
The honourable member for Talbot. Mr. Speaker, to sum up, Mr. Firth never paid for a coffee, a restaurant meal, a golf game, whiskey tasting, despite everything we heard at committee?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yeah, I've admitted I would go out and I would invite government employees to lunches, to coffee, but understanding that if they were to show up, they'd already asked, they're gone through the regular chain of command and have already asked permission to accept that.
The honourable member for Talbot. Well, this is a good example of a contradiction. We went from saying that the amount is zero to admitting that indeed there were dinners, golf games, whiskey tastings with dozens of federal public servants and so on. So I will repeat my question then. What's the number there, whether it be in kind or in money? What is the amount given to federal public servants?
Mr. Speaker, the first question was specific to what was given to receive contracts by government employees. That's why I said it was zero. Once the contracts had been awarded through regular procurement practices, they became a client, and we would have frequent meetings to check on the health of the project, whether that was over lunch or whether that was during coffee.
The honourable member. But why do that if it was not to obtain federal contracts?
Mr. Firth.
Because I'm looking for Mr. Speaker, I'm looking for a health check on how my resources are performing and whether or not also I need to replace any if they're not.
The honourable member. These people with whom the witness had coffee with or whiskey tastings, had he pre-identified them as people who could grant him contracts, or were they simply people that he just met in the street?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, they were clients who we engaged with once we'd won the contracts.
Monsieur le Président, c'est ce qu'on appelle.
Mr. Speaker, that is clearly offering a service paid in kind to obtain a contract. That's the very definition. Next question. Mr. Firth justified his hourly rate, $2,600 per hour, by the fact that he didn't just work 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. Does he believe that Canadians and Quebecers got bang for their buck for that amount of money that they paid for many hours of Mr. Firth's time?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the hours that we're quoting were specific to ArriveCan. We had 22 other departments and other contracts we were working on at that time. And I'd like to also remind that we were picked. We didn't solicit, and we provided services to over 50 resources were in there and delivered on 170 releases on the application.
L'honorable député de Terrebonne, qui a 1 minute.
The honourable member, 90 seconds. Mr. Firth and Mr. Anthony met at Veritac, which was accused of colluding on contracts in 2009. At the time, Mr. Firth was working there. The judge who looked at the matter stated that all employees should receive anti-collusion training. Does Mr. Firth remember anything from that training?
Cette séance, pour l'instant.
I will just interrupt this for a moment.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, in 2009 at Veritech, I was a recruiter. I was not involved in the sales cycle whatsoever, so I don't think I had training in 2009.
L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Well, even a recruiter is considered an employee of a business, so that's a real shame. What we see here today, Mr. Speaker, is that there's a real problem in procurement, and there's been a loss of control when it comes to gifts accepted by public servants, as we've seen today. So I think that CPSA, which was one of the main government agencies to offer contracts to GC Strategies, should be placed under examination because Quebecers and Canadians need to get back the money that was wasted on this business and others.
Mr. Firth, if you would like to answer, you have about 13 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I know we can stop the clock. Can I please have the question again? Please, I wasn't getting through in my headphones very well.
On va demander l'honorable député de Terrebonne à répéter.
I will ask the member to repeat. Mr. Speaker, does the witness agree that if public service didn't respect internal procedures, they should either lose their jobs or, if this is a generalized problem at the CPSA, that agency should be placed under monitoring?
Mr. Speaker, I believe if there's any wrongdoing that's been found, there should be repercussions.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach now has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think Canadians across the country, members of Parliament, are disappointed, not just in the dramatic failure of the procurement system in our country to address the real issues of value for money, but it sheds light on what is a terrible instance of reporting, missing information, lost invoicing, and we don't even know the total amount today. Mr. Speaker, this is a serious and grave matter facing our country, and one that stems back now decades. We heard that through testimony at the Public Accounts Committee, to which I'm a member, several times from other contractors that would speak to us about the tremendous vulnerability that exists in Canada's procurement system, but also exists in the lack of investment in our public sector. According to the Globe and Mail, for instance, since 2017, GC Strategies has received $46 million in federal funding. The flow of tax dollars to GC has increased steadily each year, growing from $32.6 million in the 2016-2017 fiscal year to $80.3 million in the 21-22 fiscal year. Now, according to the Auditor General, GC Strategies ArriveCan app cost Canadians almost $60 million. And the total is still undetermined due to that very lack of documentation and paper trail, a serious and grave error in and of itself. On top of that, we noticed that this vulnerability of our public service and procurement creates a system where insiders are able to profit in extreme amounts because of a system that doesn't have the proper accountability, that doesn't have the proper follow-through, and albeit in this particular instance, lack of proper procurement. Canadians are rightly disappointed. Not only that, they're angry with the very real fact that Canadians wake up every single day, they go to work, they pay their taxes, and they do everything right. And then to be told that the tax dollar that they work so hard for isn't going to closing the gaps in social or economic outcomes or material benefit for Canadians, but is going towards the dramatic outsourcing of jobs that Canadians in our public service could do. I recognize that not all IT services, of course, can be dealt with here at the House of Commons or in our public service, but that a great deal of it could. So my questions now through you, Mr. Speaker, to Mr. Firth. When did Mr. Firth first start doing contracts and business with the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, my first contract would probably mean 2011.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
What are the names of your various companies that have contracted or subcontracted with the Government of Canada since that time?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I can't probably remember them all, but I'll do as best I can. So, KP. Sorry, can I get qualification on that question, please?
We'll stop the clock. Do you need to consult with your... Or I'm not certain what you're asking me, Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I just want qualifications if you're speaking about my companies or companies that we do sub work through.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, I'm inquiring as to the names of the companies that he is the owner or co-owner of since the time of 2011 that has been doing business with the Government of Canada.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the only IT staffing firm I've had is GC Strategies as an owner. We were not part of Codale.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Does Mr. Firth believe the work that his company has done, GC Strategies, in relation to ArriveCan was good money for Canadian dollar?
Mr. Firth?
Mr. Speaker, I believe the team we put forward, and again, as attested to by AWS, Microsoft, and BDO, were the only ones at that point that had capacity to build this application. So I'd say yes.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth in the past has spoken about his worries or concerns or even at times perceived rejection of the Auditor General's report, in particular to this fact as well in regards to dollar or value for money. What does Mr. Firth have to say in relation to the Auditor General's report on value for money?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not questioning the report. I'm just, again, it's the inputs that were given to the report. There's a big delta between the 19.1 million that that the AG's report claimed that we used to build the application versus the 11. But because of the financial system and the tagging for other projects associated, because these contracts were pandemic response contracts, they weren't specific to ArriveCan app, I can understand why there's a discrepancy.
Member for Edmonton Griesbach.
Now, Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that when our public service does the job, that they're doing it knowing that the most important piece to that is the outcome for Canadians, making sure that the service is truly up to the standard that Canadians expect. When we outsource that work, when we take that job away from the public sector, when we take it away from those who work for the better good of our country, it comes with a price. It comes with commission and it comes with profit by the private sector in this particular instance. So how much money did Mr. Firth take home from these contracts?
Firth?
Mr. Speaker, again, not being elusive, I don't have that exact number in front of me. Sorry.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to not be able to supply such a number when, as a matter of fact, the company would have been the responsible for not only issuing invoices or issuing the amount owed to them, but it's also up to an owner of a company to administer and to have paperwork for their employees, including themselves if they're paid. Does Mr. Firth suggest that he hasn't paid himself or hasn't kept track of payments to himself? And if not, how can we in this chamber are able to get this information and what he supplied in writing later?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I can answer that question. I just don't have the answer right in front of me right now. Like I was not given a set of questions that will be coming at me in the next hour and 20 minutes. Sorry.
Mr. Firth, there was a second part to that question.
Can I ask the honourable member to repeat it, please?
Clock has stopped. The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Would Mr. Firth supply the amount he took home from government contracts?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I think that information has been provided to the committee.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
You and your partner, or Mr. Firth and his partner, Mr. Anthony, have both made accusations that the Auditor General's report is false and that she is lying. He made clarity to my question in relation to some of the numbers supplied. In addition to those numbers of supply, what other areas of that report would Mr. Firth contest?
Mr. Firth.
Off the top of my head, Mr. Speaker, the numbers one is the one that's caused the most media attention, and so that would be the one that I would be more focused on making sure that was corrected.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
The Office of the Procurement Ombudsman says that, quote, overly restrictive mandatory solicitation criteria favored GC Strategies for a $25 million contract. GC Strategies had been involved in the development of their requirements, which were included by the CBSA in a request for proposal for a contract ultimately won by Mr. Firth. To be clear, Mr. Firth's company, GC Strategies, by evidence of the Ombudsman, participated in the recommendations set out in a request for proposal to which Mr. Firth's company applied and was awarded a contract. Does Mr. Firth understand that the Auditor General concluded in that investigation that there was no evidence to the effect that GC Strategies supplied a proposal even to get this contract? Can Mr. Firth please explain how and who from the CBSA requested information related to a contract like the one that they were recipient of, and what aspects of that proposal did Mr. Firth supply for requirement?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, just a quick clarification on the question. The Auditor General identified no proposal for the national security exemption ones, not I don't think the one that we're discussing right now.
Mr. Griesbach. I'm sorry, the honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
In what capacity was Mr. Firth involved in developing and contributing to the CBSA requirements for the ArriveCAN contract?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, previously mentioned there are 220 requirements in that RFP. There were 3 suggestions we put forward, understanding that they need to know the technology stack, they need to know the types of resources they would need. From that point onwards, that was everything. And the 220 other requirements were all public information that could be obtained through buy and sell or any other RFP that's hit the street. And on top of that as well, it was PSPC that still deemed 40 qualified vendors who could respond to this RFP.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Can Mr. Firth please explain the process, in particular the timeline of events, that enabled Mr. Firth's contribution to that RFP?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I was approached in May of 2021, I believe, for suggestions and understanding what kind of requirements they would need for a team to continue the work. And I believe the contract was awarded a year later, and there was no conversation in between that.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach has 20 seconds on the clock.
Does Mr. Firth believe that to be a conflict of interest?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I do not. Again, these were 3 suggestions of 220 that went through multiple levels, that went through multiple departments before it being even awarded and evaluated.
This concludes the second round of questioning. Mr. Firth, would you like a pause before the House proceeds to the next round of questions?
Mr. Speaker, yes, please.
La séance est suspendue jusqu'à la...
The sitting is suspended to the call of the chair.
Well, they're on another break. Anyone new to the channel, please like and subscribe. You can help support the channel with a super chat or sticker that does go towards keeping the equipment operating. So let me know in the comments what you guys think is happening right now, or if anyone is going to get in trouble, because so far I don't see any of this leading to anything relevant or that's going to put any liberals in jail. So let me know what you think. those of you that missed the question, do you believe that there will be any accountability that will come out of this line of questioning with Firth? Or is it just going to end the same way all the other committees have ended, with nothing, no answers, just back at square one? You know, it's funny, James, because you're probably right. It is a giant, it's just an event to keep you distracted from what's really happening. But it is highly suspicious that the first thing the Liberals tried to do was to shut down the Firth standing before the bar. So, I mean, that in itself screams guilty, that there's somebody in there that's really guilty. The second part of my question was, do you feel that there will be any accountability that comes out of this line of questioning to Firth standing before the bar? Because right now, how I see it, I don't see anything happening. I feel like it's going to lead nowhere. Like, Firth's got his lawyer there too, so you know he's going to be very careful as to what he says. And as you could tell by some of his answers, he tried to avoid actually answering with non-answers. So you know that he's still going to hide stuff. But it does seem like Firth is covering up for some Liberals, and the Liberals are trying to shut down accountability. Yeah, he's a Liberal trainee. Yeah, he'll be an MP next for the Liberal Party of Canada. China will get him elected. How much this process alone is costing taxpayers? I think they said it's like $80,000 an hour to run the House of Commons. It's a ridiculous amount of money. So yesterday's federal budget, no, that was a joke. It's just more debt is all it is. And these half programs, so half measures, so it excludes so many people in any of these programs. Like, so diabetics and older people, they completely skim past millions of Canadians. But yet, we all pay for it. These programs only go for certain people. It's the people they want to vote for them. It's craziness. Well, there won't be a specific vote on the budget. It typically, when the budget, it comes out in pieces and they vote on it. So it'll be one part of the budget and then they'll, vote in the House on that part and then another part. The Conservatives the Conservatives and the Bloc are never going to let them pass that whole budget. So the 5-minute bell's ringing now, so the House is going to go back into session in a couple minutes. Like a broken record, anyone that's new to the channel, please like and subscribe. It really helps support the channel. Since my channel's not really being shown to a lot of people, YouTube just stopped promoting it, so it's up to you guys to share my content. Some people like Trudeau, some people don't. I can't stand him.
Order. The sitting will now resume.
Sitting will now resume. The House will now proceed to the third round of questions. Each recognized party and the Green Party will have 5 minutes.
The House will now proceed to the third round of questioning. Each recognized party and the Green Party will have 5 minutes each.
All questions are to be addressed through the chair.
I would remind honourable members that all questions are to be directed to the chair.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Firth said today that he was completely unaware of connections between Vaughan Brennan and senior Liberal staffer Jeremy Broadhurst. Completely unaware of connections to senior Liberals. But Mr. Firth received a text on February 1st, 2021 that was subsequently reported in the Globe and Mail that specifically described the involvement of the Deputy Prime Minister's office where Broadhurst was Chief of Staff. Does Mr. Firth want to correct his earlier response?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I have no knowledge. I cannot remember sending that text message.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Firth received a text message on February 1st, 2021. It was reported in the Globe and Mail. That report in the Globe and Mail, along with other information, sparked subsequent hearings at the Government Operations Committee. Is Mr. Firth claiming he didn't read that article or the text?
He skims. Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I cannot remember that text message and I can't remember that article.
The honourable member from Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
A final chance to tell the truth. Will the witness tell the House about any connections and relationships between him and Jeremy Broadhurst, or that he is aware of between Vaughan Brennan and Jeremy Broadhurst? He received texts. It's in the Globe and Mail. Will he tell the truth?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, I do not know of any communications, or did not remember that text message, or I haven't seen the article.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Firth claimed today that it is common practice for clients to request and receive suggestions about the content of RFPs from those who bid on. How many times since 2015 has GC Strategies provided these kinds of suggestions to government clients regarding RFPs that they then bid on?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, without being elusive here, I do not have that number. I don't know.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Will the witness undertake to provide a response to that question in writing to the Speaker and the Government Operations Committee within 14 days?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we were kind of spoken to previously. Do we have to provide information to the House?
I'm going to pause the session while I consult with the chair.
There's like barely any Liberals there. They're all hiding.
To all honourable members, the process which was set forth by the House was that subsequent to this, to the calling of the bar and the admonishment and responding to questions and supplementary questions, that this matter, the answers from the questions that are being provided by Mr. Firth would be referred to the to the House committee for them to evaluate and to make recommendations. The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, rising on a point of order.
The witness has asked if he has to provide responses. Right. I would submit to you that the whole reason he is here is because he has refused to provide responses. This is why the House is taking this matter so seriously.
So what I understood Mr. Firth to say to the honourable member was that he was asking whether or not he had to provide a response to the Speaker of the House. The point that I was making before in terms of the order that the House had set out, the order that the House had passed, was that what testimony is brought here today will be referred to the committee. The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Will the witness provide the response in writing to the question I have asked that he claims to be unable to answer? Will he provide it in writing within 14 days to the Speaker and the committee, yes or no?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I will.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Why did the government go to GC Strategies for this sort of advice? How did GC become a favoured contractor and advisor regarding RFPs to the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I got my first contract in 2011 and have done subsequently since by just responding to RFPs. I haven't become, I don't think, I mean, it's flattering to be a recognised person to provide requirements and help for the federal government.
Order. We're looking for members to conduct themselves in a manner that is befitting of this occasion. The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Speaker, it's very flattering indeed. According to committee testimony, Mr. Firth received $2,600 per hour spent working on ArriveScan. That's substantially more than the earnings of an average NHL player. Very flattering that they came to him for advice. Very flattering that he was paid so much. Does he see this as a reasonable rate of compensation for what he did?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, in the testimony, they were quoting hours towards ArriveCan. We had 22 other departments and 20 other contracts we were working at the same time. It's impossible for me to spend 250 hours on one contract when I have to service and maintain other projects with other clients.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Is the witness involved with any other companies?
Mr. Firth.
Just my holdco, that is the 50% owner of GC Strategies.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
What is that holdco, and does it do business with the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, my holdco is a numbered company that was used to register the name GC Strategies.
Honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Does it do business with the Government of Canada directly?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it does not.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The witness discussed the health of contracts outside the office with Paul Gerard, Treasury Board CIO. Did he discuss replacing resources or increasing resources at that time?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I've had many conversations with Paul Gerard. I can't remember every single one of them.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan only has a brief period of time, but he's been asking very quick questions.
Did he discuss new contracts? And since he claims to be unable to answer that question, will he respond to it in writing as well?
The honourable, sorry, Mr. Firth.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I thought I did answer the question.
I'm going to ask the honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan to rephrase the question.
The question was, in meetings outside the office with Paul Gerard, did they discuss replacing resources or increasing resources? Did they discuss new contracts? And if the witness is unable to answer that question, will he provide a response in writing?
Mr. Firth.
I will respond in writing. I don't have all those information and I don't have every conversation with Mr. Gerard catalogued.
Questioning by the member for La Prairie. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier, the witness mentioned that he had doctored 2 CVs that led to the attribution of the contracts.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think I said that earlier.
The honourable member for La Prairie. I'm convinced that he did. I was here. I don't understand why he said that he didn't say that, because earlier the Conservative mentioned, did you doctor 2 CVs? He said yes, but after the contracts were awarded. Did I misunderstand?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't say I doctored 2 resumes. I said that the business was already won. I didn't amend any resumes to win any contracts. And the contracts were for the resumes were for a task authorization that was already won business.
The honourable member for La Prairie. He didn't say that he then amended. He amended the contracts after. The CVs after.
Mr. Speaker, I've never amended a contract.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Earlier, our witness said that public servants got changes after the contracts were given. Is that what he said?
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I do not understand the question.
We will suspend the clock, and I will invite the member for La Prairie to ask his question once again. I'm ready. Can I go? Earlier, the member for Terrebonne asked the question, did you already pay monies or get gifts in kind to public servants? And the witness said yes, but only after contracts were awarded. Is that true?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we don't give gifts and do bribes to win contracts.
The honourable member for La Prairie. He said earlier that he paid for restaurants or things like this to public servants, but he said that he did after contracts were awarded. Is that true?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, that's correct. We would always, once a contract's been awarded, you want to have a relationship with your client to understand if your resources are doing a good job or if they're not, and try and pivot and move as fast as possible to replace them. The fact that the invitation went out and the officials showed up suggested that they followed the code of conduct and they'd already asked permission from their superiors.
The honourable member for La Prairie. So for a public servant, for him is the client. Is that correct?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, if we're doing government business, correct.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Is it possible that when you give premiums or gifts after a contract, is that before another contract, possibly?
Mr. Firth.
I believe it would be before another contract, but that doesn't mean that it's for me.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. So, inaudible for the interpreter.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it was inaudible for the translator.
We will stop the clock and ask the member to re-ask the question. If I may, Mr. Speaker, I will conclude based on what we heard today. So it's normal for border services to deal with GC strategies, to give them $19 million without having exceptional skills or that they be necessary in obtaining contracts or the disclosure of contracts. We also have to accept the fact that public servants got gifts before or after. It's not clear. We have to accept the fact that GC strategies help to draft contracts and tenders because the Border Services Agency doesn't have the skills to know its own needs and its own criteria when the time comes to develop a tender or request for a proposal. And this is very concerning, and we are supposed to find this normal that somebody would get $84,000 for nothing. And we're talking about this money for which nothing was done. So here who is at fault here? That's the question. Perhaps it's the Canada Border Services Agency's fault, perhaps at the tip of the iceberg, but it's not normal, Mr. Speaker. Listen. The Auditor General said that this was the worst bookkeeping she'd ever seen. This is not normal right now. The Canada Border Services Agency is working on a system to record imports, GCRA, and the committee of the House of Commons said that there are a number of irregularities. It's of concern that this agency continues to do its work after what we've heard today. And this government must, and this agency must be more responsible. It must be under trusteeship. We must get the money back, taxpayers' money that was spent for reasons that we still don't understand, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Firth, if you would like to, although there might not have been a question, if you'd like to make a comment, I'll allow you this time to do so.
Mr. Speaker, I'm good. Thank you.
Reprise de question.
Resuming the questions, the Honourable Member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
The Honourable Member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that, through you to Mr. Firth, now that you're aware of the powers of Parliament, I wanted to ask through you to Mr. Firth whether he regrets not answering the questions that were asked of him, not once, not twice, but 3 times at the Government Operations Committee.
Mr. Speaker, absolutely. I've sent that in writing to, I believe, to all members of Parliament prior to coming here for apologies for that.
The Honourable Member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
I would like to know if Mr. Firth met with any members of Parliament during the process for the RFP, for the contract for ArriveCan, or during the contract process.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I did not.
Honourable Member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to know if Mr. Firth, outside of the committees where he has been brought to formally, if he has ever met or spoken with any members of Parliament from, regardless of which party.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, can I speak to my counsel for 2 seconds, please?
Clock is stopped. Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I have not.
The Honourable Member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to be clear, Mr. Firth has not had any private conversations at any point with any member of Parliament over the period of the committee hearings. And I'm not talking about committees themselves. I'm talking about private conversations, hallway conversations, phone calls, anything of that nature.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I have not.
The Honourable Member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a scandal when we talk about the ArriveCan app. We haven't seen this kind of scandal since the Harper regime. And we saw a scandal that cost Canadian taxpayers $400 million. At the time, we were talking about a majority Conservative government, and they refused in any way whatsoever to get the answers that Canadians were looking for. And of course, Mr. Speaker, that Conservative scandal was one for which we never got the information. And we saw then the ArriveCan scandal, where, since this is a minority parliament, we are now getting the answers. So this is something that's extremely important, because we're talking about the parliamentary power that we have. And in a majority government, as we saw under Harper, we were not able to get the answers on the $400 million that disappeared under the Conservatives without any transparency. Today, we have the possibility, however, of getting more answers, and I think that this is important. So Mr. Firth, he talked earlier about the fact that he influenced, if I understood, 3 elements only of the 230 requirements in those contracts. Is Mr. Firth saying that he did not influence the contract, or is he saying that he didn't influence the scandal as much as is claimed?
Mr. Speaker, the answer is correct to both of those. I had no influence at all on the contract award, and I had no influence on the ArriveCan scandal.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby. Earlier, Mr. Firth spoke about the fact that he had changed the resumes. We're talking, of course, and this is in the committee testimony, that there was somebody who had 13 years of experience. That was not true. And there was also other pieces of information that were changed with regard to those individuals. I would like to ask 2 questions, Mr. Speaker. First, does Mr. Firth regret that these resumes were falsified? And second, reminds the fact that to date the federal government has not asked for those amounts to be repaid. We're talking about those amounts. So, Mr. Firth, the question to Mr. Firth is he prepared to repay to the Canadian public the controversial amounts in the awarding of these contracts?
Mr. Speaker, the Bottler contract was no way related to the ArriveCan application, and furthermore, I made $0 margin on the Bottler opportunity.
Maintenant, c'est en reprise des questions.
Resuming questions, the Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
The Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this historic, unprecedented occasion. I'd like to put this question through you, Mr. Speaker, to Mr. Firth. I know he will not have them with him at the moment, but will he provide to Parliament, through the Speaker and to the Operations Committee, the full list of all website domains that he has registered or requested to be registered in pursuit of his business as an IT staffing firm?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I can do that.
The Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you. I'd like to review some of the answers that the witness gave earlier today. To the Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley, when asked if he would like to have had, if he thinks back on it and reflects on his answers to committee, if he wished he'd answered differently. And his answer was he wishes he could have answered more concisely. I'd like to put it to the witness, through you, Mr. Speaker, that no one has accused him of answers that were verbose. He's been accused of and found to have answered in ways that were evasive and dishonest. Would he like to amend his answer to say he wishes he had answered honestly in the first instance?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, as a result of this abolishment, there's a lot of mistakes that I've made. That's why I was here. So the answer would be yes.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
In response to questions from the Honourable Member for Megantic Arab, he similarly had said earlier today, I made mistakes. Is it correct to say that when the witness says, I made mistakes, he is acknowledging that he behaved in ways that amounted to a contempt of Parliament by being deliberately misleading, evasive, and dishonest? And I would also suggest that most Canadians would not consider these to be mistakes, but deliberate efforts to mislead Parliament.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, they were mistakes. I have a lot of respect for this, and this was not deliberately misleading.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
I'd like, Mr. Speaker, in the last few moments that we have here with the witness, I'm trying to put myself in the position of a Canadian watching this on television and wondering, how could this happen? I think it's clear on a factual basis and respecting this place and everyone in it that there's been here, this example, as the Auditor General has found, as the Ombudsman has found, an appalling failure of our procurement process that's completely unacceptable. And the individuals involved in GC strategies, particularly Mr. Firth and his partner, have benefited personally from what can best be described as extremely dodgy business practices. I'd like to ask on behalf of the people of Canada and it's an obvious question, I'm not suggesting there is an answer, but I'd like to ask Mr. Firth, is he a member of any political party? Does he donate to any particular party? Has he been involved in currying favor with any party or political parties in this country?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I have not.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you. I'm pursuing evidence that you gave to the Government Operations Committee on October 20th. It's a very interesting skill set which you which the witness has to obtain these various contracts. Mr. Firth said that between, quote, my business partner Darren and me, we have 30 years of experience dealing with IT companies, or whether dealing with independent consultants, or we have the luxury of dealing with true subject matter firms. We build a network in which we know the people. Is it the case, to ask the witness, that the business experience, which gained him millions of dollars in personal benefit, amount to having an extensive Rolodex of people in the Ottawa area whom he entertains?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it has afforded us the luxury of having a large Rolodex of resources we can use and get them contracts within the federal government.
Remaining very brief question to the honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Firth, given the experience here and knowing that you have health challenges, all I can say is, aren't you ashamed?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, do I have to answer that?
Yes. Yes, you do.
No, I am not ashamed. I think
it is my duty to inform the House that Mr. Firth's presence at the bar is no longer required and that the order is discharged. Il est mon devoir d'informer la Chambre que la...
It is my duty to inform the House that Mr. Firth's presence at the bar is no longer required and that the order is discharged. Mr. Firth, you are now excused from the bar and will be escorted out by the Sergeant at Arms.
Mr. Firth, you are now excused from the bar and will be escorted out by the Sergeant at Arms.
Anyone new to the channel, please like and subscribe.
It being 5:44, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at third reading stage of Bill S-209 under private members' business. Comme il est 17h.
It being 5:44 p.m., the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at third reading stage of Bill S-209 under private members' business. Call in the members.
Call in the members.
All right, everybody. I think that's going to be it for today, and I'm going to shut down the stream and go back to my regular life. Anyone that's new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Anyone who would like to can donate to the channel through a super chat or sticker, or even becoming a member. Other than that, have a wonderful night, and we will see you tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Thursday? At 10 a.m.